red button at the top of the screen.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Thanks, Nicola. Good morning, everybody. So can I welcome you to this formal board meeting of Health Education England. It's a public meeting, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. We've got a very full agenda. But Nicola, do we have any apologies received?
We don't have apologies, David. We've got notification from John Latham that he will be joining the meeting a bit later than planned.
Okay, thank you. And I spoke with Harpreet last night, and I think Harpreet thought he might not be here dead on 9:30, but would be joining. So I can't immediately see at the minute whether Harpreet's with us, but
he's not at the moment.
Can I just draw attention to the fact that this is Laura Roberts's last meeting as a member of the executive team in Health Education England, and I'm delighted we've got the item on our agenda later today, widening participation, where this responsibility will pass from Laura as she moves on to pastures new to Mark Radford. But I think at the top of this meeting, I'd just like to thank Laura for all your contribution to Health Education England over its life. You've been a loyal and dutiful servant of the organisation, but more importantly of education and learners here in England. And I think the work that you've done on widening participation is demonstrated in the report that you presented to us today by way of handover. I thought the advances that have been made on ensuring that there are routes into education and training in healthcare careers is set out beautifully in the report. And I, for one, did not underestimate the skill, the effort, determination and resilience that has resulted in those changes taking place. And Laura, I just want to take the opportunity at the top of this meeting to pay tribute to your contribution to that work over many years, and thank you. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the board in those thanks as well. I can see Soraya applauding, and I'd just like, and Navina, so thank you. And I'd just like, on behalf of the board, to wish you well in what you choose to go on to do. I know that public service ethos that you've demonstrated throughout your career will be something that you'll take with you into whatever you go on to do. So great thanks from me personally, but also the rest of the board for everything that you've done, Laura. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So can I also welcome Phil Huff as well, who is the co-chair along with Liz of our public advisory committee. You remember we renamed this from patient advisory committee to public advisory committee to capture that broader range of experiences that the committee under Liz and your leadership, Phil, bring. So very much looking forward to the slot that we've got later in our agenda, but you're very welcome, Phil, to join us for the whole of the meeting, so thank you for that. So Nicola, I think that's the thanks and the welcome I need to give. Will you let me know if I've missed anybody out?
Not that I can see on the list, yeah. David. We do have other colleagues joining us for items during the meeting.
We do, yeah, we do, and I'll welcome those at the time. Okay, so let's push through the agenda this morning. So item 2 is a register of interest. Are there any changes anybody wishes to make to the register of interest? Liz, please.
Yes, so David, I've been in touch with Nicola because there's one item left on for my previous role that needs to come off, so Nicola's going to take it off the register. Okay,
thank you. Thank you for that. With that, if I could just ask us to note the register of interest, it's a dynamic document and is kept on our website, so it's there for everybody to see. Item 3 is the approval of the meeting, the minutes of the meeting we held in September. any matters of accuracy or detail that any member of the board wishes to raise? Are there any matters arising which are not covered elsewhere on the agenda? No. Okay, so if I could ask that we approve those minutes as a record of our meeting in September. Thank you again, Nicola, to you and your team for those. Item 4 is the agenda planning document. Again, I think this is self-explanatory and gives us all a sense of the forward agenda for the board. Are there any comments anybody wishes to make in relation to the planning document? Again, this is something that I discuss with Nicola and Navina on a pretty regular basis. So when colleagues ask for reports, or we in the board meetings ask for further reports, they tend to get included on this agenda. So it's just a way of keeping track of our forward plan, and because it's public, it also lets a wider audience see the work that we intend to take forward over this next period. So if I could ask us to note that. Oh, I've lost board packs. Let me get back in. Then come on to the committee chairs update, and the agenda has them out. So Soraya, is there anything you want to update us on the remuneration committee from the 19th of October?
No, sir, David, it was just formal business to review the executive salaries through guidance from DHSC, which we followed. So nothing else to report.
Yeah, very straightforward, but thank you, Soraya. And I don't think we've got John Latham with us just at the minute. Callum, is there anything you would like to draw our attention to from the Audit and Risk Committee?
We just a couple of things, Sir David. Thank you. We obviously had an update from our internal auditors, and what their work's in an early stage, but on track, which is great. The main focus of the meeting was actually a broad discussion about data and informatics within the organisation and the risks associated with that. In all regards, really, from data security through to performance of underlying systems in managing our business and that kind of thing. And I think the key point to note is that we're going to be taking that forward in association with the Performance and Business Committee. Andrew George was happy to agree that approach, so that we're going to get a date in the diary in the very near future to get into that in more detail.
Okay, very good, Callum. Thank you. Andrew Foster, People and Culture Committee, you met on the 1st of November?
Yes, we did, and there were some quite significant highlights to this meeting. I think we took in full the most recent staff survey, I think colleague survey it's called, with results compared to the previous version, which was about 2 years ago. There was a really significant improvement almost across the board. There were a couple of exceptions where things could be better, but it was really striking to see how much improvement there had been, and I think a very significant endorsement really for the strategy that the board has put into Best Place to Work, and we received an update on that as well. And the many actions that continue to be implemented arising from the original discussion groups and new arrangements to get new ideas. So this seems a really sort of positive, virtuous cycle of improvement. There are a number of things going on inside HEE at the moment. The future of work, a survey on culture and so on. But I think the conclusion was that really everything fitted under the umbrella of the Best Place to Work. And I think seeing it in that way made it much clearer what the overall programme of work was. Not everything was perfect. We noted the continuing lower scores on equality and diversity than we would like to see. And there is some delay in implementing the NHSE pilot on equality and diversity. Nonetheless, that is due to start very shortly. And the committee have asked the executive to come up with an action plan on equality and diversity in the early part of next year. Two final things. We saw a very sophisticated version of a workforce dashboard. There's both a general one and one for the staff survey, which is really making excellent progress and is now available to all the regional directors so that they can break down the results and see where they do better or worse than other regions. So a really useful management tool. And finally, we also welcomed Vicky Matthews, who came along in her capacity as Director of Leader and Culture, introduced herself, and we're looking forward to working with her.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think Navina draws attention to the staff survey in her report as well. So I just echo what you've said about just the very impressive improvements in performance. But let me not incur on Navina's space, and she can celebrate that in her report. So, but thank you, Andrew. And then the Performance and Business Committee met on the 3rd of November, and I think that was the only one that I didn't get to this quarter. But Andrew, George, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing very much to report. We received a finance report which highlighted at the moment there's a forecast of a 30 million underspend. However, that figure doesn't include the COVID extension pressures, which are still to be realised. This underspend is largely due to reduced levels of clinical activity and also some national ones. The gap will undoubtedly be closed by the COVID. It probably won't be closed totally, but it will be narrowed by the COVID. The performance report we reviewed, but we'll see that later on in the meeting. And we had some very good indications from David and from Callum as well about the issues that were the minor issues that might be bubbling under the surface that didn't raise it, but they're not a sufficient level to escalate to this committee. And we thought about our future agenda very much, and so we're going to be thinking about at our next meeting about how we really start measuring value for money, and also the agenda that Callum mentioned around digital that we want to do jointly with audit. And we're also going to be running a workshop, which is now we have a date in the diary around how we develop our business, concentrating mostly initially the education, the postgraduate education, and then spreading from that as we get more confident and used to doing that. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And just to pull out that point, the fact that your committee goes through the performance report in some detail means that that detailed scrutiny is done by you and those committee colleagues, similarly with finance, which means that we can take a lighter touch on the performance unless you particularly want to draw our attention to something on behalf of your committee. So just to make that point, but thank you.
And just to say, David, we have a standing item that we always ask, is there anything we should promote to either yourself and Navina or the board? We always ask that question explicitly as part of the meeting.
Oh, that's I think just good practice, Andrew, so thank you for that. Yeah. So Navina, the floor is yours to present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir David. So in this report, I'm going to take it that colleagues of the board has read the report, which highlights review on the current situation in the negotiations bilaterally around the settlement with the spending review. We continue to make progress and we are keeping our partners informed of where there may be impact. The report also covers HEE's commitment and plan for our contribution to sustainability, and it covers work that we're doing in the medical reform update and also the delivery of the 50,000 nurses update. We also wanted to make sure that we gave the report some ideas of the support that we are offering to students, learners and trainees during the winter. And as discussed earlier with Andrew Foster, the outcomes of our own colleague survey. From the colleague survey, I just want to say that whilst we want to build on what's gone well and learn from what we're doing well, there are some areas which we really want to focus on, particularly the experience of our staff with disability and also our BAME colleagues. So there's a lot of work to do in those areas in particular. Before I open up to questions and reflecting the level of activity across HEE, there will be a number of updates which I need to share with you that didn't get into the report. However, I wanted to start off by taking a moment to reflect on where we are as an organisation and how things are feeling generally within HEE. Our staff have been, colleagues have been sharing with us in many different forms how we are all feeling about things right now and the future of our work. So I thought I would share with the board. It's hard at this time of year, it always is hard, but like many of our partners in health and care, this year feels particularly difficult. The last 21 months have been like nothing else. And, you know, we anticipate that the next few months will be quite challenging still. And we are thinking about how we're going to manage that. Winter is always difficult. Winter pressures are already in the news. And there are threats of flu and other things that will add to the load. So our teams are all working very hard to think about how they're going to manage that. And of course, we're still in the pandemic. And some of our colleagues within HEE, despite being vaccinated, have been a bit poorly. Most of them have recovered well, but we also need to know that we are supporting our colleagues who have themselves experienced COVID recently. So our HEE colleagues are still working very hard, and there's constant talk of the workforce crisis, and we are yet to resolve our financial settlement. So within all of this context, people feel a little bit pressured, tired and worried. However, this is an organisation, and I've been here a year now, that is continues to hold quite a lot of hope. And this is the way HEE is. So we are confident that working trilaterally with our partners, we will be able to get the funding we need, because one of the things I know is that partners are all agreed on the importance of the work that we do, and we all want to find solutions. It's also some good news. We've delivered some good things, and the work on the future framework for workforce planning has been really inspiring. Also, we have found that people are turning to HEE to be partners in seeking solutions and wanting to work with us. Whilst this brings its own pressures, it's the pressure that for a long time we've been seeking out. And there are many, there's a lot of progress across the wide range of best place to work initiatives. We also are having some rather difficult conversations. I always say one difficult conversation at a time, where we are entering into some quite challenging areas that make us all uncomfortable. But we need to do this in order to make progress around best place to work. As we begin to look to 2022, we are really excited about the work ahead, especially developing our strategic framework, developing our operating model, and becoming much more aligned with our partners in service, and make sure that we contribute to the recovery efforts and beyond. So for me, however, one big thing is making sure that we make things feel better within HEE, not just about the big programs of work, but how we work with one another. We have many successes, and I'm sure that we're going to we need to make sure we celebrate success intentionally. This is a phrase that I've sort of stolen from Julian Hartley when he came to meet with us a couple of weeks ago to talk about how he and his team encourage people to maintain hope in their organisation. Now, some news. I'm really delighted to share some latest news on medical recruitment. So round 3 of specialty recruitment is close to completion. And as things stand, we are expecting 100% fill rate in core psychiatry and anaesthetics. We have opened an additional round of recruitment for radiology and histopathology to support the expansion in line with our long-term plan ambitions. I also want to just make a quick mention of GP training in particular. We can confirm that more than 4,000 new recruits have accepted places to begin specialist general practice training this next year. It's really exciting. It's really, especially for our colleagues in general practice who are under so much pressure, but it's really important now that we look after these new trainees and recruits so that they can really enjoy their work in general practice. The round one for August 2022 specialty recruitment opens later this month, and we are expecting over 25,000 applicants. Our public health schools have also been reorganised, and this is good news. They won and received a prestigious 2021 European Association of Public Health Deans and Directors Good Practice Award. So it is really important at this time, especially, that we showcase excellence in public health education and training. We continue to work on our HEE's global strategy for the future with our partners across Whitehall, and just a reminder that we are working on 3 main areas: the offer to NHS staff for their learning and development, an offer to NHS organisations with regards to the development of the future workforce, but also an offer to global partners for mutual benefit from collaboration. So we are now developing a detailed business plan for delivery of each of these offers in 2022 and 2023, including milestones and outcomes to work with our colleagues across Whitehall. And then finally, I'd like to just mention that we are working on the HEE mandate for 2022 and 2023. And there's some progress towards next year's mandate. We are planning to develop a draft of our next mandate in collaboration with NHSEI colleagues and provide that to the ministers for their consideration and approval as soon as possible. And so there's a shared preference for this approach, which is a focus on a short set of high impact strategic objectives, and also to develop this draft and ensure the timing and content aligns with budget allocations once they are settled. And also we are continuing in the mandate to make sure that we support the response to recovery and elective services related to COVID and the priorities as set out in the long-term plan. So we will bring a further update, obviously, to the board as soon as we have more details which we can share. I think I will end there and take questions for the main report. Thank you.
So while people line up the questions or comments on what is a very full report, both in writing and orally, Navina, will you just say something about the strategic workforce and the progress on the deliberative events? It's probably worth just pulling that out and just emphasising that long-term workforce planning that we've kicked off and just where we're up to. The Today programme are covering the NHS this week, and that was one of the themes in the interviews that they conducted this morning. It was less about financial resources and more about human resources, i.e. people to actually undertake the jobs that are required. So will you just draw out what the ambition is there and what progress we're making?
I'll make 3 points, Sir David. The first is that we had from the call for evidence a really good response, which enabled us to get a really good picture of how key stakeholders and beyond felt about and their thoughts about future workforce planning. I'll ask Joe to say a little bit more about the findings if colleagues want to hear. And then the second thing we did was we used that information to inform discussions at the first of 3 deliberative events, where we had more than 200 partners give of their time. And it was a really good open conversation about what demand and supply might look like, what service models might look like, and what that would mean and what the implications would be for workforce of the future. And we are going to have 2 more deliberative events building on that. The third thing that we did was we had a challenge session from some leading voices in the world of workforce planning right across the world. And so, David, you chaired that meeting, and that was a really helpful meeting because we shared the work that we were doing, and they offered some really good challenge and support as to where we should go further and how we should delve to develop this work. The main point, I think, for me was being really clear about how the strategic framework would lead then to a workforce plan. And that was a really important point that we would need to draw out in our work. Joe, I think Joe had to go to a meeting with the minister, but I'm not sure if you are still with us, Joe, and whether you can add anything. If not, I will.
I can't see her in attendance, actually. So I think that's very helpful, Navina, and I think a number of the non-executive director colleagues attended the deliberative event. So let's just take that as read. And the ambition is to produce this framework by the spring of this year. And I think the Secretary of State has already commented on the fact that this work is underway and will result in the framework, but is also, I think, pushed to ask for the delivery of a plan as well, if I've understood that correctly.
That's correct, Sir David. And at our January board, we'll bring an agenda item to public board to describe exactly where we've got to and what the outcome will be and what we will publish and when.
Really helpful, Navina. So thank you. So let me call colleagues in the order I think you indicated. So thank you for that. So that's both Navina's oral report as well as the written report is the kind of territory that we cover, which is just about everything that we do, I think. But anyway, Liz Meir, over to you, please.
Thanks, Sir David, and thanks, Navina, and a really positive report. And I was able to attend the deliberative event, and I think HEE have got to be congratulated for the range of partners and stakeholders they drew together into that event to have a really rounded discussion about the future of workforce planning for health and social care. It was excellent. And I think one of the things that you outlined at the beginning of the report was our colleagues in HEE, and that they've had COVID, they've had family members had COVID, they've had issues, and I think what I wanted to draw out was what came out of this report for me was how we're leading with kindness and compassion to support those colleagues as well. They're doing a great job in difficult circumstances, and I think sort of throughout this board meeting we have got a focus on how we're doing that. So it's great to hear that from you, and it would be good sort of to touch on that throughout the rest of the board meeting about how we're doing that to support colleagues who are doing a difficult job in difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Soraya, please.
Thank you, Sir David. Navina, thank you for an excellent report. And I really want to focus on the survey, which I know we're going to discuss probably in more detail, both here, but also through People Committee. But I think really what's critical is how we work with our staff and our networks. And I just wondered at the moment in terms of how we're communicating back. So we have some excellent data through the survey, through the networks that we operate, but just to make sure that that is fed back to staff and that we then also work with the network to take it forward. So that's one point. And the only other question I've got in terms of the excellent recruitment we've seen this year, are we looking at any hotspots geographically where the data set might actually tell us a slightly different picture? And again, it may be through Performance and Business Committee we could drill down on some of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Soraya. Navina, will you come back on these at the end? Andrew Foster, please.
Thanks, David. I think all of us with our various contacts in the NHS are aware of the great pressures there are at present. And as you said, David, the BBC is covering this in the mornings at the moment in a very interesting manner. So in the context of that, I just wanted to ask Navina a bit about the section of your report on support to students, learners and trainees. And what you draw out there is the university saying it's not really in the best interest of students if they're pushed into supporting the service any further, but also that services will be under great pressure unless trainees can be brought in to help them out. So there's a big tension there, and I'm just wondering how that's going to be managed. Who's going to make the decision?
Yeah, very good question, Andrew. And I think that does sit right in the middle of that paragraph, actually. So, Andrew George.
Thank you. I liked a very good report, very good to see everything moving forward. I just wanted a little bit of background information, if I could, about two areas, which I'm totally supportive of, but I could see can raise some hackles, one of which I've certainly been buttonholed about. And so one is the apprentice model, which I think is a really exciting new development. I've already had one dean of a medical school come up to me and harumph a little bit about it. So I'd just be interested in understanding the timeline of it and how we are and what we're doing to engage people around selling that in a positive light, because it is a good news story. And I guess connected to that one, the movement of potential movement of places in cardiology, haematology, and obs and gynae in August 2022. What are we doing to communicate the impact of that to trusts that might be affected? Thank you.
Again, very good questions. Anybody else want to come in before I invite Navina to Andrew Morris, please?
Thanks, David. Just one point around the relationship with NHS Improvement and NHS England, because going forward, workforce is so important to us. I'd be interested in hearing from Navina around how she sees the joint working progressing, particularly around trying to get new starters into the service, into training, and also other initiatives to bring back people in, retirement, etc. So just to get some early thoughts on arrangements for next year, David.
Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else want to come in? No. Navina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to take two of the questions, and then I'm going to ask Wendy and Mark to address some of the others. So the first one was Soraya's question about communication with our colleagues about the survey and what we're doing. So there are a number of different channels of giving information and sharing information, both through messaging and webinars, etc. And then we also make sure we use our existing management structures so that all the regions and all the different directorates that they have taken their own information and discussed it with their teams and then got some ideas back. And I think there's one more initiative, which is that we're going to ask staff to help co-create the actions that we want to take. With regards to networks, it's hugely important. So with Laura leaving, I'm going to be stepping in to chair and meet with the networks. We've got a meeting in a couple of weeks' time to make sure that we are clear about the kind of support that they will be giving us in order to address many of these issues. And when Vicky starts as well, she will also be very much part of that discussion, as is Thomasina, who is the lead for EDI, for DNI in HEE. So all of those options and all of those places, if you like, we've got them sort of, we're making use of all of that. We will bring more detail to People and Culture Committee. And then I will take Andrew Morris, your last question about the joint working. So over this last year or so with our partners in NHS E&I, we've got through the programs, through the work with the People Directorate, through the recovery, reset and recovery work streams, but also through nursing and all the other work streams, and includes digital and transformation. We feel that we have got a place at the table, and we also feel, I think I said in my report, that more and increasingly our partners are asking us for information and asking us to do more in that space, and that's certainly what's happening at the moment. I think it could be formalized more than it currently is, so that would be certainly something that I would like to explore further with colleagues in EI. At the regional level, it's certainly working very well and is really being embedded because it is really close to the point of care. So they're very practical things through the people board structures and ICS structures, and we are developing our operating model to fit with that. It's really more can be done for some of our national programs and longer term programs, which is our sort of focus.
Yeah, I've done visits to ICSs and some trusts recently, and I do have a very good sense of the progress being made in those places of embedding workforce into the people boards and the work of the ICSs going forward. So I think it's variable, but nevertheless, I think there's lots of really good evidence of how workforce is being hardwired into the work going forward. So yeah, sorry, Naveen, I interrupted you. I thought you'd finished.
Thank you, Sir David. So in terms of the other questions, I think, may I ask Wendy to address the recruitment hotspots, the apprenticeships in medical apprenticeships, and the August 2022 movements of trainees and how that will impact on trust. And can I ask Mark then to talk about the students, learners and trainees and our position on the winter? Thank you.
Thank you, Navina and Sir David. I'll start with the apprenticeship model because the other two are linked. We're at the very exciting stage of the apprenticeship standard development process, which is this year and next year, Andrew. And we have a very wide group of stakeholders that meet regularly. We also have a steering group, and we've obviously engaged the Medical Schools Council in great detail, and indeed the structure around this I think has been really interesting because perhaps the medical profession is anxious about any change in a very traditional approach to training, but the initial expression of interest, of course, came from employers, which is, I think, key to this. This is a very new partnership approach to a medical degree apprenticeship. So we have a number of different schools that are actively contributing to the development work. So in our Trailblazer group, we've got Queen Mary's University in London, Newcastle, University of Central Lancashire, along with the Medical Schools Council. And on the implementation group, we've got a wide range of medical schools, including Brunel, which is one in progress, wanting to be a medical school, ranging to traditional medical schools like Exeter and Hull. We can share the details of who's been engaged at what time. I think one of the key moments in the development of this was when Professor Liz Hughes and the team that are leading this work and I were invited to the BMA Council, which was the first time HE's been invited to address the council. It was a really interactive and incredibly useful session, and two members of the BMA Council are on our steering group. And that was a real, I think, watershed moment for the breadth of the medical profession hearing about this. And this is one of the ways in which we intend to widen participation in a medical career. It's not the only one. And there are lots of other elements that need to be focused on. But this is a different way of people coming from different backgrounds into a medical degree. And the most important thing to note is it is the same standard as any degree. The GMC, as the regulator, will ensure that. And obviously that close working with colleagues across employers, university sector, the profession and the regulator is key to delivering this. At the moment, we have not got a planned date for enrolment of individuals. That will start to be planned as we understand the implications from the apprenticeship development process. But in terms of speculation, we've had a sort of mental aim of 2023 in our mind for this. And again, a lot depends on where employers are at that point. So it's a really exciting development. Very happy if members of the board wish to brief Sir David. Liz Hughes can set up a briefing session if that's of interest to people. Yeah. Moving on to Soraya's point and the recruitment issues. Distribution and recruitment are linked. Recruitment can't be done in a silo of just filling the usual posts as we always do, even though we're very proud of how well we've done with areas like core psychiatry and general practice. Adrian Brooks is chairing a strategic recruitment group that has colleagues from NHS EI, the service, colleges, and the 4 countries, where we're looking at what have we learned from the distribution of recruitment each year, so that we can pick up, Soraya, the ebbs and flows that you point out, because sometimes there are local anomalies that we just don't understand. If we can pick them up early in the process, we can adjust them mid-process, which benefits both the public and the applicants. But more importantly, we are doing what we said we'd do, which is looking at what are our tools to address health inequalities. And that's where the big distribution work comes in, Andrew. Nobody is going to lose a doctor. That is not going to happen. We are not moving individual doctors as part of the distribution. What we are doing is using our investment in education and training to promote the address of health inequalities, so to meet the under-doctored areas. There are, of course, enormous challenges. Everybody knows how difficult it is to move a single doctor or a post. So these are ongoing conversations, and they're being led by our regional colleagues, and in particular our regional deans, and right down at school level. And of course, people from Patrick's team are supporting that, looking at workforce transformation, what's the multi-professional team that can support this. But fundamentally, if we continue to do more of the same, as you saw at a board some months ago, we will simply miss the opportunity of increasing a sense of learning in a community of need, developing that community of learning in that place, and then wanting to stay in that area. We've shown how successful some of our manoeuvres around improving GP recruitment into under-doctors areas should be. We now need to do the same in acute specialties. So Andrew, I recognise your pain. I'm more than happy to come and talk to people. We are very keen that this is a collaborative and cooperative approach, and where we have opportunities to train differently, we are looking at them in great detail. So there is no cliff edge for either organisations or specialties. There is a process leading up to it.
Just to say, Wendy, I just want to say I'm very supportive of this. I think it is absolutely the right direction. So it's just around making sure that people are informed and things. So I am very supportive of it.
Yeah, just to endorse that, Andrew and Wendy, thank you for such a clear explanation of what is being done and what the implications are of that, because I think it is important to be open and clear and transparent, as well as collaborative in the way that you've outlined as we move this forward. So very pleased that Andrew's asked a question and it's provided the opportunity just to set that out. I think we should think about what's on our website, and then it's there on an ongoing basis, and not just through the information that we make available at the board meeting. Mark, could I ask you, and can I also give you the task of doing this speedily, please, because we're running slightly behind time, and I want to do justice to our guests and the other agenda items that we've got. So I'm sure you will rise to the challenge, Mark, so thank you.
Thanks, David, of course, at pace. Colleagues, I'd just like to say at the outset quite publicly my personal thanks to all of our students, learners and trainees. They've been remarkable during this pandemic in terms of the support of the NHS and other parts of the health and social care service. Myself, Wendy and many colleagues across the executive work directly with NHSE and also importantly stakeholders to deeply understand the experiences of our students, learners and trainees. And whilst they very much have supported the endeavour of supporting the pandemic, they have a double challenge, which is to complete their programmes and also, importantly, gain experience that's valuable for the health and social care system once they kind of graduate into their employment. We have, without doubt, seen increases in challenges around students in practice. And certainly there has been a degree of disruption during the last 2 years. that will have medium to long-term implications on supply to the NHS and social care. So we've been working with partners to mitigate some of the issues and risks for both students, universities and the service. So further changes to this are something that we would not take lightly, and we've been working with NHSE and other colleagues in relation to the winter position and what we need to do to secure medium-term supply of graduates coming through. And as the paper highlights, there are a number of students, trainees and learners whose programmes have been disrupted that do require additional support and make sure that they can progress onwards. I think our students are very much telling us that they feel that their confidence needs support, so that early transition into their careers in the NHS is vitally important. And again, we've been working with partners, NHSE and other colleagues to make sure that those earlier transition arrangements are correct. But Andrew's challenge, I think, is a fair one, which is the long-term workforce challenges that the NHS faces is going to be around improving the supply. So we do have to support our students, learners and trainees in their practice, particularly in terms of gaining experience on placement. We've been doing a lot of work, and I know Wendy has, through the trainees programme in terms of support for trainees directly into trusts and organisations. We've put in additional investment to support practice education and learning and placement support for students. And again, we work directly with our universities, particularly looking at the pastoral support that the students are requiring, recognising they've experienced an extremely tough time, similar to our NHS staff during this period. But there is a tension, which is that some of our services are extremely busy, which means that sometimes the learning experience is less than ideal for students, and where that arises, we deal directly through that with our regional colleagues into the individual services. And also try to mitigate some of the disruption that's been created by flexing the placement opportunities to ensure people can gain the experience they require to come on into the service. But the future of our workforce solution is going to be support for our trainees, learners and students coming through. So we'll continue to work with NHSE and other service partners to make sure that experience is done to the best of our ability, but recognising that whilst we're under pressure, extra thought is going to need to be required to support our students during this period of time.
So what I'm taking from that, Mark, very helpful explanation, is that these are matters of judgment and balance, and will engage at a local level in an appropriate way where those tensions surface, but to ensure that there is a way of supporting the students to continue with their learning and education. One of the things that I've seen going around is just how much effort is going into striking that balance. And the truth is, I think I'm right in saying that the third year nursing students this year have had every single year of their nursing education disrupted by COVID, and that's the reality, that you've been trying to create the framework within which we can balance the protection of their learning and their contribution to the treatment of patients. And I have to say, I think you demonstrated real skill as a Wendy in relation to striking that balance, and I'd encourage you to continue to do that. So can I thank Navina, you, Wendy and Mark for that contribution. I just want to draw attention to the last paragraph in your report, which is about the staff survey and the fact that the progress on the involvement of staff within HEE was captured in this survey, with an improvement from 50% of staff recommending HEE as a place to work 2 years ago, with now 75% as reported in this survey. I think that's a 25% improvement in performance. And I just want to pay tribute, Navina, to you and to the executive team for the work that you've done to make that happen. But it also allows me to bridge nicely into the next item on the agenda, which is under the general heading Culture and the Best Place to Work. And I hope that we've got Helen Mansfield and Kamaljit Bungar joining us to actually just share with the board the work that you have been leading with other colleagues to develop a staff cancer network. So can I just check, Helen and Kamaljit, you're with us?
Yes.
You are? Good. Put your cameras on, please. Join us. Right, great. Kamaljit, welcome.
Thank you.
And have we got Helen as well?
Yes, hi. So shall I start?
The floor is yours. I'm not sure, I presume you've rehearsed this. I thought your slides were beautifully brief and apposite and punchy. So I think you can presume we've read them, but please draw our attention to those important issues. So you've got the full 20 minutes. I'm putting others on warning that their time is going to get carved up, but you've got the full 20 minutes. So
wonderful, thank you. So firstly, thank you so much, Navina and Sir David, for inviting us today. I'm Helen Mansfield. I'm head of the HEE National Data Service and also co-chair of the Cancer Network. And I'm joined by Kamaljit Bungar, who's our treasurer, and we will jointly provide an update on the network today. So first, some context, and I've heard, obviously, because I am head of the National Data Service, you can expect a few statistics, and I've heard the staff survey mentioned a few times this morning. So in Britain, over 10 million people have a limiting long-term illness, impairment or disability. This is 18% of the population. And obviously, cancer sufferers and survivors are within this category. And 50% of those affected by cancer now survive for 10 or more years. So this isn't just about getting through the illness, it's actually about your life beyond that. The recent colleague survey, HEE colleague survey, showed up to 30% of respondents potentially having a disclosed or non-disclosed disability. And those that do disclose a disability report an experience of work that is notably below average. And I think it shows why these types of networks are so important. So I was going to say a few words about myself, because one of the things about the network is that it's the power of personal stories. And then Kamaljit's going to say a few words, and we're going to share the task of presenting to you what the network's done. So I've worked for HEE since it began in 2013, and before that in the Strategic Health Authority in London. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018. And while I was off work, I found HEE to be a really supportive and considerate employer. But when I returned, it was really difficult. And if you imagine, when you return to work, you're at your worst. You've had chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and it's taken its toll on you. And also you want to be like you were before. So you want to be as good as you were before. You want to be doing your job like you were before. And obviously work is a huge part of that journey. So what did I learn? No one gets everything right. So we all try, don't we, to get everything right for our teams, but we're not going to get everything right. And we have to try to learn and support each other effectively. And we also need to apologise if we make mistakes. And as I said, we all know that it's through our own experiences that we can see things that we can change for the better. And because of this lens, Kamaljit and I are here today, I think. So Kamaljit, over to you. And then Kamaljit's going to say a few words and do an introduction, and then I'll say a few more things. So over to you, Kamaljit.
That's great. Thank you so much, Helen. So Helen's asked me to say a few words also about my experience with cancer and HEE. So I joined Health Education England from the private sector in a different field, probably just after it became Health Education England, so maybe 8 years ago. A couple of years later, I was diagnosed in 2017 with cancer, and it was a very challenging time, as I know Helen has already said. Lots of fears around how will I survive, how will I cope, what kind of support will I get, the time taken for appointments, etc. And then, unfortunately, in my case, less than 6 months after the first round of cancer, it returned and it spread and is now life-limiting. So I live with life-limiting cancer, which has its own challenges, but also, provides a lot of opportunities for taking positives and strength as well from the situation too. So it's not always negative, but particularly challenging, I would say. My experience from HE was phenomenal, and I have to thank all my management team for the support I received. It was absolutely exemplary. But I do know, to give me that support, there were a lot of behind the scenes challenges for them, against policy, against process, against practice. And I think they fought very hard to make my journey the journey that it was. And I think from talking to people within the network, I think my journey was not necessarily the norm, in the sense that I don't think many people had the positive experience and support that I had all the way through, and I'm still getting. So it has been a very mixed bag, I think, for people. And one of the reasons we set up the HEE network is because in 2020, there was a session aimed at student staff for raising awareness of cancer, and 500 plus staff attended that session on a voluntary basis. And the questions that came out made it really clear that there was a need for something out there to support our workforce with the challenges that they are facing, whether they are facing cancer themselves as a direct individual, or whether actually they are supporting somebody with cancer or nursing somebody with end of stage cancer. The variety of cancer experiences doesn't just start and stop with that one individual experiencing it. It affects the whole community, a whole family, a whole network, so to speak. So the Cancer Network was born earlier this year with a lot of support from HE, and we thank you for that. And the purpose of it really was to set up a network to support individuals, to share stories, as Helen has already said, because we found that a really powerful thing for people to be able to talk about their experience. But more than that, it's also to think about how we influence and impact on policy, on HR, on systems, on processes, how we make the process better through the experience, through the stories that we hear, but also through the evidence that we gather from the information given to us. So, the whole thing about evidence-based practice, we'd like to bring in some of those things into our own network as well. In terms of when you're first diagnosed, the key primary person that we're supported by, or should be supported by, is your line manager. And that journey to even getting to talk to your line manager is really challenging. I remember when I spoke to mine, I think I broke down in tears with every single manager. So, it's a really hard thing to do. So the experience you get shapes your future in terms of how you communicate with your employer. So there are fears about, when you come through the first round of treatment, there are fears about recurrence, always. There are fears about the side effects that you're going through, because it doesn't stop at the end of treatment, in terms of radiotherapy, etc. There are years, often 10 years plus, of endocrine therapy which impact on you on a daily basis. They impact on your sense of self, your ability to think about how you work, who you are, how other people see you, and the stigma that's still sometimes associated with cancer, but people's fears around cancer and talking about it too. We know that one in two people will have cancer as we go forward, and that means for an employer the support needs are going to increase rather than decrease as we go through time. And the understanding and support that we get from managers makes that huge difference. And as I've said, it's the first port of call. I think, we are also very clear that managers need support. So we are looking at ways that we can support managers through training programs, through Macmillan workshops, and through other areas too. We want managers to feel that they are confident and have the skills and the knowledge to support their employees in the same way that the employees need to be supported. And I'm going to hand over to Helen now to talk about our priorities and also our achievements so far. Helen.
Thank you, Kamaljeet. So what are the achievements and what are we doing as part of the network? We've achieved a lot already. So we've been having meetings only for 6 months, and we've heard from many colleagues about their experiences and their personal stories. which has been so powerful. I think it always strikes me how powerful that is to hear about what people have actually gone through. And I think that's what we've tried to do here today for you. We've established regular meetings with HR to discuss feedback from members and how we might influence policies and inspire improvements. And I think the support we've had from HR has been great. We've agreed to share details of networks with people who are on long-term leave, as they're a key group that can benefit from support. We've had people dialing in, people who are having treatment, who have not really known, obviously because we're new, hadn't known about the network, but how can we make sure that people know about these kind of support mechanisms that are available? We've established a budget. Thank you very much to HEE, to Laura and to Navina for that. And this has enabled us to develop a training programme for managers supported by Macmillan. And I have to give a shout out to Kamaljit on that, who's done a huge amount of work. We know that our HR policies are open to interpretation deliberately, so they're deliberately flexible because we want our managers to be able to apply them appropriately. But if we want them to do that, we need to train our managers so that they know how to do that. I think so much of the way that people are treated when they come back from long-term illness is to do with the capabilities of managers, and some people will never have had to deal with that kind of thing before. So we really need to help people to prepare and to become equipped. We're developing a buddying scheme to enable one-to-one support for colleagues if they would like. You know, the hardest period is sometimes when you're waiting for the results of your initial biopsy or your initial appointment. You're not actually on leave, you're actually at work, and you don't know what the answer is going to be. And that can be so difficult. We hosted our first coffee morning last month, and Navina came along, and we're so grateful for Navina's support for right from the start. It's been fantastic. We've also been lucky enough to have, because of course we've got them within HEE, specialist speakers and Q&As with people like Jed Byrne Ferry, and next week we've got Tara Lacey, who's an occupational therapist, who'll be joining the network to share top tips for optimising life following diagnosis and treatment and answer any questions. And we've got lots of things about well-being. So it's not just about the negative, this is about really thinking about how we can help people. We're also redeveloping our pages on HEE Connect to offer fully populated resources and tips. And we've had loads of help from members on that. And we're consulting all of our network members on the priorities, and we're all part of delivering change. So the last thing we wanted to talk about is what support we think we could get from this board. So we're really grateful to be here today and to have a platform to share our ideas. And of course, the Best Place to Work and the colleague survey provide the right context for this. So we think there's an opportunity to improve the organisational approach to those returning to work following cancer treatment or other long-term conditions. It's not that there aren't already loads of good things, but there's still things that could be done. We'd like to see training for line managers embedded as part of ongoing provision, not a one-off. Currently, we're funding it from our budget, but actually we'd like to see the organisation recognising that that's something that's needed in an ongoing way. We'd like to see training of this type mandated for line managers who are managing people with a cancer narrative. We'd like to see, and I know that this is something that is in the mind of our executive, and I know that it's already recognised, but recognition of the value of organisational honesty if mistakes are made, you know, willingness to actually say, look, I might not have got that right, and an open dialogue with HR and the organisational leadership. And I think us being here today really does give us a message. I was lucky enough to be on the network panel that interviewed our new director of people and culture, and she was really clear about the commitment that should be there for training and for helping our managers and our staff and our teams to actually become equipped to deal with colleagues with challenges. So finally, and I hope that's been of interest, I must say thank you to Navina, to Laura, and to my line manager, Rob Smith, for their support personally, and to the network in its first 6 months, and also to the membership who've put in a huge amount of work. None of this would have happened without the people who have joined the network. So thank you, and we're very willing to answer any questions you may have.
Helen. Kamaljit, thank you very much for that. I'm hesitant to open this up for questions because this could last rather a long time. So can I ask colleagues to keep it brief as we get through the agenda? I'm not going to look for answers to the questions, but I think what you're looking for is general support from the board. So I think this is the opportunity for the board to signal that. And I'd just like to say something at the end. So again, colleagues, could I, as your hands go up, could I ask you to just pay attention to the fact that we've got other colleagues to join us. I want to do justice to every item and everybody that's joining us here as well. So Soraya, please.
So David, I think firstly, thank you to Kamaljit and Helen for such a clear presentation, and I cannot say any more around the importance of training of managers, because it is a very difficult journey, not only for the individual, but actually for managers as well. So really, really supportive that this is picked up organisationally wide. Thank you. Thanks,
Soraya. Andrew Morris, please.
Thanks, David. Fantastic stuff. The one thing I would ask is whether we are guaranteeing as a board an icebreaker conversation with the manager and employee when they return to work. Because I think we should be doing that, particularly now as people work online. It's harder to have that conversation. So I think, you know, we should offer that guarantee to all employees.
Thanks, Andrew. A really practical point. And in the context of just a variety of different ways that people are going to be working in the future. Yeah. Liz Meir, please.
Yeah, thanks to David, and thanks Kamaljit and Helen, and a presentation that really spoke to our hearts as well as our heads, so thank you for that. And my question was, you're doing such great work here. There's obviously some progress to be made that you're asking the board about, but I wondered whether like the training package for managers could maybe be converted into an e-package so we could share wider than HEE, so you impact right across health and social care with what you're doing, because it's absolutely fantastic.
A really good point, Liz. And you made the point earlier about compassion, and this is, I think, is just a fabulous, fabulous demonstration of that. Laura Roberts is one of the people that has made this happen. Laura, over to you.
Yeah, if I may, just 3 very quick points. One, you know, the timing is so pertinent because of the colleague survey showing that particularly the issues about we have much more to do about colleagues with a disability. I really like Helen's point about being able to link in with our in-house specialists. We forget how many of them we have, because often when they work for us, they've got a different job badge on. So Jed is a good example. We all think of Jed in global, but actually he's kind of 30 odd years as a breast surgeon. So actually we need to be able to kind of utilise people. And then finally, I'd just like to say the feedback to both Kamaljit and to Helen, which is the Cancer Network is incredibly well run. And Navina talked earlier about the work that we're doing with all of the networks, and we've got a meeting with all of the staff networks next week or the week after. And really they are a case study of how to organise and run and be clear about the ambition and their contribution to what to HEE as a kind of two-way dialogue. So thank you both to Helen and to Kamaljit and all of your colleagues. Thank you.
Well said, Laura. Andrew George, please.
Thank you, and I'd echo my support and also say that's for me one of the most focused presentations I've had by a network, and really helped me see it. So I've got 2 quick questions, one of which is, when is the right time to do the manager training? It seems that all managers should have awareness training, but actually they need perhaps support those times when a member of their staff has a diagnosis and needs support, and therefore it might be a 2-step training, but you probably thought of that already. The other one is not really for you as a network, but for us as a wider, how are we supporting other people with chronic disease conditions across HEE, which won't be as numerous as cancer, but for those individuals clearly will be as important. Thank you.
Well, rather than Helen and Kamaljit answer that question, Andrew, I'll ask Navina and David Farrelly to take it away and actually begin to build it into our response. But Andrew Foster, you put something in the chat, and let for the sake of completeness, do you just want to mention it, because I don't think the chat gets onto the public record, and it'd be good if your comments went on our public record and went directly to Helen and Kamaljit, please.
Well, by all means, and really, I just wanted to put out three things. I mean, one was to say enormous thanks and congratulations for the Cancer Network. It's so impressive what you do and so much appreciated. Secondly, it's for the executives, but I hope that they will pick up your request for line management training. Sounds like a very powerful idea. And then thirdly, as Andrew George has just said, you know, I would prefer to see this extended to other serious diseases as well as cancer. So those are my three quick comments.
Thank you all. Helen and Kamaljit, particularly thank you to you. I've never ceased to be humbled by the way that people respond to adversity, but also leadership. My definition of leadership is people that make things happen. It's not about the position you hold in an organisation or a system. It's about what you do and how you do it. And I think what you've demonstrated is real leadership by starting the network, but also, just to play with Lizzie's words from earlier, real compassion to other people in the organisation, and a real contribution to making HEE a compassionate organisation that supports everybody that works within the organisation. And I think your challenge to our systems and processes, which can often be overly bureaucratic, to become much more human in the way they respond, is one which is well made. So thank you for doing that. And Helen, your combination of personal story and data is a winning combination. I wish all of our board meetings had that combination of numbers and stories to make the point. It's a very powerful way to communicate, so well done to both of you, and thank you for sharing your personal stories so openly. Never easy to do, but you've done it with dignity, and for that I'm sure I speak for the whole board in thanking you for what you've done. So thank you very much indeed to both of you. And Naveen has put in the chat about continuing to support the network from the executive committee, and that the people and culture committee, Andrew, can actually provide some of the ongoing oversight to this work as we develop it and progress. So massive thank you and appreciation from all of the board, I think, for the work that you've done. Very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the morning if you so choose. If you've got other things to do, then we fully understand the demands on your time, but a big thank you. So if I can now turn to the item on strategic planning, which is on the Advancing Dental Careers report, and this is a really important report. There's been some terrific work undertaken on advancing dental careers. Again, very collaborative, very participative, very inclusive in the way that this work has been developed and taken forward. And I thought it was really important that we as a board were able to consider the work that has gone on in developing this work. You know, the data around access to dental care and the underlying inequalities in relation to access to dental care really provide part of the context for this, and how we secure the workforce for the future in addressing that challenge, I think is hugely important. So I particularly welcome this report, and I certainly will be asking for the board to be updated as we progress the implementation of this particular strategy. I think, have we got another guest?
I'm going to introduce it, and I think we've got.
You're on mute, Wendy.
Sorry, I'm going to introduce this, David, if that's all right. And then I think we've got Sarah Hurley, I think, has joined us now as the Chief Dental Officer. Jane Luca as our lead dean, Malcolm Smith as the author and prime mover behind the latest report, and Simon Gregory from my team, who's been supporting this. I think they've all joined us now. I hope so, because they're the subject experts. But shall I launch off?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to try and wrap this up by about 10 past 11, Wendy. So I'm shaving 5 minutes off your time, so apologies for that. But Sarah, Jane, Malcolm, and Simon, of course, you're very welcome. So thank you for joining us. And Wendy, back to you, please.
Thank you, Sir David. As Sir David says, this has been trailed quite widely. Navina kindly mentioned it at the time of publication in September. But this is a 3-year review, and really has been, I think, the first review since the Department of Health's modernising NHS dentistry in 2000. Phase 1 of our work we published in spring of 2018, and then an interim report in 2020. But the culmination of a huge amount of stakeholder engagement, cooperation and collaboration across the system has resulted in this formal report, Advancing Dental Care. Just to put it in context, and paying tribute to Helen, our previous speaker, there are just around 71,000 dental care practitioners in 6 groups. 42,500 dentists, 4,280 are on the General Dental Council specialist list. So this is not an insignificant workforce. And I think Sarah Hurley's leadership on dental health inequalities has been absolutely key to how we've approached this. This has not been about us reorganising our bit of the system. This has been a deep look at what the future dental workforce will do to address significant health inequalities. And I'm very grateful, both from HEE's perspective, for Sarah's constant support, challenge, engagement, and ongoing interest in this work, but also the fact that we've been able to engage across the system through her good offices. Not accomplishing this report alone is something we hear in HEE. We have to work with others. But I think those of you that have read the report in detail will understand that the complexities of dental care across the country are such that the workforce must practice at the very top of their scope. And that is not something I think that we have seen happen. The recommendations in this report will enable those individuals to work right at the top of their scope of practice, which of course is not only efficient and more productive, but will enable more patients to be seen in their own communities. We touch on the distribution of postgraduate dental trainees. We touch on the apprenticeship model, and you will see that within this report, we've been building towards an implementation programme. So unlike many reports, this doesn't have 30 recommendations that we tick off or get left on a shelf. This is an active living document. And indeed, we are already in train to deliver some of the outcomes we require. If you look towards the end of the report, you will see that there are ongoing work streams in the Dental Education Reform Programme, which is labelled as that quite specifically because these are reforms ranging from undergraduate course reforms through to apprenticeship models, through to actually what does the multidisciplinary team look like and how will it train together in the future. So some quite far-reaching educational challenges, some workforce challenges, some investment and resource challenges for us in terms of distribution. And we have committed that each of the work streams will report regularly. The next formal report will be in the spring of 2023, i.e. another publication. So this is not the end of something. I think this is the fulcrum in the middle of something. So I propose not to speak any longer. I wondered, David, Sarah might like to say something now. But I think the team are open to questions and comments from the board. And again, I'd just like to pay tribute to the extremely hard work that the team have done over the years building this. I've been to many of the stakeholder events, and a very wide-ranging number of people have engaged in this throughout its process. So thank you very much to Malcolm Smith and to his predecessor, Nicholas Taylor, who kicked off this work with me and Sarah sitting in Stuart House as we mapped it out. So I'm very grateful personally, but I think it's a document that will stand the test of time in terms of building a new workforce.
Very good. Thank you, Wendy, very much for that. Sarah, please, your opportunity to just say a few words to the Board of Health Education England.
So first of all, thank you for this fantastic horizon scanning but future visioned document. It's already received its first challenge, and that was with NHS England moving its focus from a dental contract reform process to a dental system reform process, which has been born out of the lessons from COVID and the lessons from our 10 years of prototyping practices with a different approach to the multidisciplinary team. It is testament to the work that's been done by Nicholas and Malcolm and Simon and Wendy that you've got a future-proof document that meets the challenge of system reform, as we're thinking not just about what the workforce does, but where they do it. And with this document, we are able to think outside the traditional clinical box. We're able to think about taking oral health to those hard to reach patients or the patients that are seldom heard. With the multidisciplinary team approach, this is not just about dentistry, it is about oral health. It is also about working across the professions. So whether it's working in social care and care homes, delivering mouth care matters as part of the routine daily care and having a team effort into care homes, or delivering mouth care matters into hospitals where we can actually prevent delayed discharge, whether it's working in special educational school settings with children that do not get routine access to care on a regular basis, which may require different sensory settings. So thank you very much for the first bit of work, but absolutely now our shoulder does not move from this wheel, because we are going to push, and it is even more important that we maintain this momentum with a broader system reform. And I am confident that the work we're seeing in NHS England is going to move us away from what I call a widget counting system of delivering dental activity to a more comprehensive and holistic approach of actually delivering healthcare prevention as well as stabilisation. And actually we create an NHS healthcare service that delivers oral health that people want to have a contract with, want to go to Lincolnshire, want to go to rural areas, want to go to coastal areas, and actually that we see a redistribution to meet the needs of the population rather than, dare I say it, the needs of a market that may not necessarily always be delivering health as we need it. So thank you for the work that's been done, but absolutely I stand shoulder to shoulder with you against that wheel as we move on forward. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the passion and parallels here with the conversation about distribution of doctors that we touched on earlier, exactly similar kinds of issues here. So I've got one of the things I would like to raise with this is how do we evaluate the ongoing progress of the ambitions that are set out in this report? And certainly from a Health Education England perspective, I would like to see some update reports come into the board which actually set out how those actions which are down to Health Education England, we're progressing those, and we can actually see our part in the delivery of the ambitions that you've just set out, Wendy and Sarah, and are so clearly articulated in this report. You know, I'd like to see from our point of view a timetable and have some confidence as some programme management background to this. But let me come out to those technical details and actually just invite comments and contribution from colleagues on the board. Andrew Morris, please.
Thanks, David. this service has been really neglected over the last decade, and I applaud Sarah's passion here to get it right. And I think a lot of the ICSs have this high on their agenda. And you mentioned Lincoln. We had a conversation with the Lincoln system yesterday, and Elaine, the chair there, did raise this as a critical issue for the system going forward. But my point is around finance. So will the resource match the ambition going forward? And has that been secured through NHS England?
Okay, let's come back to that. Are there any more questions from colleagues? No. Well, Soraya, thank you.
Thank you, Sir David. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. The vision, I think, is really clear, and talking to some colleagues in the profession, probably quite overdue. And I think a real opportunity for students, particularly science graduates, who may wish to think about a career move and navigate their way through. What I didn't get a sense check for, obviously Andrew's now mentioned resources and finance, but what do you feel some of the key barriers may be in actually getting this ambition through? It'd be interesting just to hear that.
Yeah, good question, Soraya. Navina?
I just wanted to, I put it in the chat, but I want to say this. The state of oral health has exposed inequalities that actually discriminates against sections of our community, of population. And actually if we don't take action and if we just sort of are complacent in kind of our success, we are complicit. And I feel really uncomfortable about that. So I think in HEE we have to put this on a much higher on our priority list. And one of the things we can do is actually challenge ourselves on the impact that we're making. Even if we can't directly influence an outcome, we do have an opportunity to have impact on others to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a point well made, and I think Sarah mentioned oral health in care homes, and I know from my time at CQC just how neglected that has been historically, and how inspection and then this action is really providing a focus on that. And again, I applaud that, and certainly my own personal experience in my family is of just how important oral health care is for people at the end of life, because the medication people are on, they can often get mouth ulcers, which affects how their ability to eat, which then affects their weight, which then affects mood and morale, etc., etc. So these are really important issues that I think this report will promote exactly some of those issues on that you've flagged as well, Navina. So really important. Harpreet, welcome. Over to you, please.
Thanks, Sir David. And just a very quick point, building on what colleagues have said and the great work that's happened here. I think the other important element of this would be around service provision and how the training then interfaces with service provision, in particular primary care, where, as a primary care physician, I've been seeing this a lot of myself, in that a lot of people come through, we often don't have the resources or the ability to direct them because there aren't enough dentists in the community. So how that all comes together would be really insightful on how we can do that. It was just an observation and a point to be made on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Wendy, do you want to come back? And then Sarah, I'll come to you and I'll give you the last word on this. But Wendy first, please.
Thank you, David. Really helpful comments, colleagues. Thank you very much, and insightful as well. In that, I think our ambition is huge. When it comes to resources, obviously, as the programmes, each of the 4 programmes develop, we will be looking at making better use of our own resources first, make sure we're using them appropriately. And that really does play to the answer, Harpreet, in your space around service provision and training interface. do we always need a dentist, or do we need a dental care practitioner, and in what shape will that workforce look? I think some really exciting conversations to be had at ICS level around there. And Andrew, you're absolutely right. Some ICS is already in that space, and I think this, if you like, this will provide, to use one of Joe's words, a framework for people to say, actually, this is what we need in this space, and this is where we get it from. So I think the resource issue is something that we will be focusing on as each of the programs roll out, and I'll leave Sarah to comment on the wider resource around the service issue. I think in terms of the key barriers, Sarah, one of the things that I've been most impressed with the team, and particularly with Nicholas and Malcolm and Jane and their dental colleagues, has been their willingness to think differently. I think the biggest barrier of all is a traditional thought process that says, oh, I can't get a dentist, they're not working in the NHS, or the service isn't there, when actually we can utilise our resources better in order to expose any gaps that are there. So I think a lot of this is about a mindset that actually look what we can do when we work together. This, as I said, is a result of 3 years of really careful work. And I think it shows that we can do things differently. So part of my message would be that actually we need to start from a position of things can be different and better for the public and patients. This is one of the stepping stones in that direction. And I think then a lot of the barriers of professional siloing, of what the regulators say you can and can't do, who commissions what, all of those really nitty bureaucratic issues start to pale into insignificance when actually you've got the aspiration, the cultural change and the collaboration across the system. And that's why I think these 4 programs, which will report at different rates and with different intensity as they roll out, are where we can really influence as a board, and I hope NHS England's board can influence the direction of travel. So I'll finish there, but thank you very much to everyone, really helpful comments.
Thanks, Wendy. Sarah?
So I'd just connect there to Wendy's last comment about the NHS board. Now, I'm not on the NHS board. I'm sort of an independent clinical advisor to NHS England. And in my advice, you can clearly expect that I've asked NHS England continue to think about the investment in service provision. I clearly was very disappointed that whilst £250 million was made available to GP services, nothing was made available to primary dental care services. In fact, NHS dentistry and dental service provision has received no additional funding. So that is an area I think that we need to have a discussion board to board in order to make this work, because I know that Wendy and the team have been running a number of pilots, and HEE's investment in providing training incentives to bring people to rural and coastal areas has worked effectively, but it's not at scale. We've seen some great initiatives that have been piloted by Malcolm and Jane, where we've been putting what I call apprenticeships, where an individual is brought to an area working for a community dental service. So we're actually providing, and that's what we mustn't lose sight of. Whenever HEE is providing training for the dental team, there is a clinical output. It isn't a bunch of people sitting at a ward side or a bedside watching someone else do something. There is a dividend for a patient and a dividend for the nation when you deliver this training. And we need to think about the conversation with NHS England about how we can distribute the funding and the service delivery. We are stuck between the rock and a hard place, which you all recognise. And again, I'm very grateful for the considerable investment that HE has put behind a number of the training programs, which I say have delivered outcomes for patients and have addressed health inequality. We're doing some great work with CVD up in Manchester, 52 million unique patient contacts in a year with dental practitioners and their teams. That's an opportunity to target people where we have a CVD issue, and we can get into the blood pressure testing. Similarly, the same that could be done for diabetes. So if we can think outside this box, we need to think about how we use our resources. But we will need to go back to NHS England and ask them to think about the quid pro quo, because this needs to be a partnership in delivering this. I wish I had the cheque to write, Sir David, but I don't. But believe me, I do knock on that door frequently. I'm going to hand over, because I think Malcolm's probably got a couple of other examples of some great work that's also been done, which just helps put things in context in the last 5 minutes.
Right, I'm going to begin to wind it up. Sarah, if I'm ever in a fight, I want you on my side. Let me just be clear about that. But Malcolm and Andrew Morris, and then I want to move on.
Thank you, Sir David, and thank you to Wendy and Sarah for their kind words. You did touch at the very beginning on how we're going to get on with it. I'm delighted to report that the implementation group is actually meeting as we speak, and if I wasn't here, that's where I would be.
Okay. Malcolm, thank you. And it gives us an opportunity just to say thank you to you personally, as well as Jane and Simon Gregory as well. But thanks, and it's good to see you on the screen as well, Malcolm. I remember almost 3 years ago now coming to one of the first events at the beginning of this programme, so it's nice to see this back at the board in this way. Andrew Morris, please.
Thanks, David. Just to say, Sarah, that there will be an invite coming to attend a board deep dive on dental services for NHS England and improvement. So Amanda Pritchard and David Pryor have agreed that. So you should be getting that in the next few days, I hope. Thank you.
Good news, Andrew. Well done. Wendy, Sarah, Malcolm, Jane, Simon, listen, and your teams, actually, thank you for bringing this. As I said at the beginning, I think it's hugely important, and there is always going to be competition for resources, but actually what we've got here is a collaboratively produced shared vision of the way forward. And very often we have these conversations about the availability of resource without having a shared vision. And I think what you've done here is provide us with a way of spending the money we currently spend on dental education in the most effective and efficient way possible, and beginning to target and direct those resources so they make the most difference to improving the health, the dental and oral health of the population that we serve. And I wouldn't want us to overlook the significance of this document, which is why I wanted it to come to this board. And it sounds like Andrew has created the opportunity for a further discussion at the NHS England board, and the beauty of Andrew being on this board and me sitting as an associate on the NHS England board is we can make those connections between the two boards and actually begin to get this hardwired in to the way that the system is responding in much the way that you've pointed out, Sarah, as a way forward. So thank you to you for bringing this forward, and we look forward to receiving reports on progress and monitoring the further development of this work as it moves forward. Hugely important for the wider population here in England. So thank you very much to all of you for that. So talking about inequalities and widening access and participation, I think that bridges nicely to Laura and Mark, the work that you've been leading, Laura, on widening participation. So if I can hand over to you, Laura, are you going to kick us off on this? Is that how you're going to deal with this?
Yes, please, Chairman. Yes, please.
So, the floor is yours, Laura.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm really pleased to be able to lead off on this item. I have colleagues who I'm going to introduce shortly, and I'm really kind of proud of the work that they've achieved and feel it's in a really good position for the kind of handover to Mark, and I'm sure he'll comment as well because he's been immersed in this of late, getting up to speed in what's happening. I mean, it's difficult to turn the television on or open a newspaper without hearing the rhetoric about the levelling up agenda. And I think what most observers and pundits say is, and what's behind that, and what works, and what does it really mean? And I think that very much speaks to the work which we've been doing here at HEE for a number of years. I know that I'm presuming that everybody has read the slides, both the report and the slides, and we have shared, our history, work programme, achievement. We've given you examples. We've explained how we measure impact, and we've talked about the future focus. We've also included some bullet points, some questions really to try to shape the discussion. So that would be the area that I would particularly like us to concentrate on. Before I do, I would like to introduce the team who do such a sterling work in this area. So we have Katie Adams, we've got Rachel Wright and Becky Orton, who are all on the call now. And I don't know if they would like to just say a couple of words of introduction, and then perhaps we go into some of the question areas. Katie.
Hi everyone, morning. Thanks so much for inviting us here today. And obviously, in the words of Laura, yes, we've put together a little snapshot around a kind of past, present and future view of our widening access and participation portfolio. Of course, I guess to add there is it's not everything that HEE are doing. We are a part of the wider kind of golden thread, if you like, of WAMP. But hopefully it's given you enough information to inform the discussions that we're going to be having today. Thank you. I'll hand over to you, Becky.
Thanks, Katie. So good morning, everyone. I'm Becky Orton. I'm one of the National Programme Managers in the WAMP team. I'm just very excited to be discussing the work and how we progress it forward. I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Becky. Good morning, everybody. I would just like to echo the words of Becky and Katie. Very excited about this opportunity and very much looking forward to hearing your comments and contribution to the agenda. Thank you.
So we've all practiced so much in making sure that it's brief and maximising time for discussion. So you can't say that we can't learn, Sir David. We're a very obedient little team. So so you'll see in the points on the discussion, number one is around about just drawing attention to the slide set. But really, it's to get views from around the board. We certainly have a lot of views on what we think HE can play, how we can play into widening access for wider society. And I mean, I think some of the examples, when Wendy was talking earlier about the medical apprenticeships, it's a great example, isn't it? If we hadn't have started this work, we weren't driving it forward, then those sorts of ideas would kind of still be sitting on the side. And that's really probably a bit like that golden thread. People are putting their hands up, so I'm going to hand back to you, please, Chairman.
All right. Laura, Katie, Rachel, Becky, beautifully succinct. And I also applaud the slide deck, actually, for the combination of setting out clear objectives and then including data, which gives us a sense of just what we've done, where we've done it, and how many. Otherwise, I just feel we're talking abstract, and there's a danger of virtue signalling, quite frankly, unless we actually begin to say what difference this activity has made. So I think, I can't remember which slide it is, and the paragraph in the covering report, I think, beautifully just take us through what the impact of the work that you've been taking forward has been to date. So I just want to say thank you for that. But let me, I think the questions that you're inviting us to contribute to are all on, is it slide 8?
I don't have
so David, would it help if I popped up the questions on the slide deck for a moment?
It's slide 9. I'd rather you didn't, Nicola. Not sorry, that sounds brutal way of responding to your suggestion. But you take away the visuals on the screen and the ability to see everybody. I think if you do that, I think it's slide 9. It's a slide headed discussion, and there are 5 points on that slide. I think I'm right, Laura, that's the one that you want us to focus on. Yeah. So, yes, so colleagues, let's open up the conversation and respond to the work that we've got presented to us this morning. Andrew Foster, please.
Yeah, this is a fine body of work and a good legacy that Laura is leaving behind as she goes off to improve her golf handicap. So I just wanted to ask one specific question, because this is an issue that I know has gone on for years and years and years, but it's about widening access to participation for doctors, recognising that people from low-income groups and people from certain ethnic minorities are tremendously poorly represented in medical students. Is this within scope for your work, and what can you say about it?
Okay, let's capture them. So Rob, please.
Yeah, thanks, David. And again, great work. I was just reflecting on point 2. What role can we play? We've been trying to promote this idea of integrated planning, and it starts with the statement that you need to know what your system goals are. And if you don't define this as a system goal, then you won't do it. So for me, it's really important and totally concurrent with the ICS mission about healthy communities and anchored institutions. Because that's where the energy will come from. If we can capture that as the goal, and it goes back to Joe's work on strategic framework, which is what are our aims and therefore what do we do? You know, the kind of good work versus the kind of widget factory approach. So I think we have got a role to play that says, how do we create the landscape within which this has sponsorship and kind of energy? So I'd like us to link up this theme with the work that Joe's doing in the strategic framework and in our kind of planning work.
Really helpful, Rob. Soraya?
Thank you, Laura and colleagues. Thank you for a really clear presentation and report. Just one question. I wondered how we're working with the regulator and also the universities. And I know, for example, with some of the new degree programmes, so I'm not specifically talking about medical widening participation, but some of the other programmes, that there were specific areas set to universities to be able to demonstrate how they were progressing in this field. And I wondered how we were tying that up, both as HEE, the regulator, and the universities.
Yeah, great question, Soraya. Harpreet?
Thanks, David. Again, echoing what colleagues have said around the great work, absolutely excellent to see this come through. I just had a question on number 2, which was around, supporting the wider levelling up agenda and thinking beyond. What role do we envisage kind of partnerships and networks playing here? One of the things that I picked up in the vaccines equality program that I was working on was to, the innovative partnerships that we can really create with communities and others that we may not think are obvious. Are we doing some outreach work on that? Because, I think you've developed some excellent partnerships and ability to work together, which can be really useful in promoting some of this. And not everyone may be considering a career or going into universities, and how do we reach them earlier to convince them, I think could be a really useful piece of work here.
Yeah, really helpful. Mark?
Yeah, thanks, David. I just echo what colleagues have said. This is great work, and I've just started to immerse myself in it, and it's super exciting because it links 2 or 3 points from Harpreet and Rob, which is that we must not underestimate the transformative nature of this to individuals and communities. It is astonishing what this can achieve, and I think Rob's point around how do we link this to the anchor institutions that the NHS and local government have in some of these communities is really, really quite critical. And Harpreet's right, how we engage with other members of the community, I think, are really important. And this is not just about, universities, there's further education colleges, there's local schools, there's faith groups that all have a part to play, because if we all step forward in the right way, this will deliver a genuinely transformative stuff for individuals and communities that we've seen through programs like this. But we're going to have to do it as a system with local government, with other parts of the system, the health in particular. I just remember when I was an exec at Coventry, ourselves and the local authority, we accounted for most of the employment within the county, alongside some light industry and other areas. So we have real leverage actually in terms of making these types of connections in different parts of the community that could make substantial improvements to education, training and people's lives. So we fundamentally have a role here, but we must do it in partnership.
Thank you, Mark. I completely agree. Callum?
Just a quick observations in connection as well with Rob's point about making sure this is mapped into our framework and strategy going forward. Also, I think it'd be really good to really explicitly link the widening participation with the work we're embarking on around funding reform, and making sure that that is as tightly mapped as possible to our objectives for widening participation. It's a complex area, but we really need to make sure that it's tightly involved with that.
Yeah, very important point, Callum. Liz Meyer, please.
Thanks, Sir David, and thanks, Laura and colleagues, for a really excellent and informative presentation. My question was about the Access to Medicine and Professions programme. 80% participants engaged went on to do further study in medicine or health-related courses. Phenomenal success rate. And are we following up those people to make sure that they maintain their attendance at courses, go through into a healthcare profession, because they probably will have some challenges on the way? So it's a question about, are we supporting them after we've managed to get them into programmes?
Yeah, really important point about conversion rates, I think, Liz, and I don't know what we benchmark this against, but I have to say I thought it was very impressive progression through. So important point. Andrew George.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a point that we've also got to look within the finer detail of our professions and our healthcare workers. I was always surprised when I went to university how two allied health professional groups who to me looked very, very similar in many ways. One was very good at attracting people who were non-traditional in the sense of going to university, and others attracted the same. And recently, going around the trusts that I'm a governor of, I'm always interested that there can be areas where in some disciplines the nurses are from a diverse background who are perhaps first generation or overseas. Other areas have a much more traditional one. And so I just plea that we've got to think about how we've got to make sure we don't just fractalize the problem and break it down into smaller area. We've got to get right down there into the depth of different professions and different areas. Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting point, actually, Andrew, as ever. John Latham, please.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a quickie, really. It's really about the levelling up agenda and work what we're doing across the HE sector, which is around really mapping at detailed cold spots. So really understanding at a sort of micro level where it's difficult for people to engage in education. So, for example, we opened a campus in Scarborough because you couldn't get higher education in Scarborough unless you transited yourself all the way over to York, and people just didn't do it. So I do think it's important to have enough detail to understand where there are areas that are within regions, particularly under the levelling up agenda, where it's going to be difficult unless there is some new forms of delivery, basically.
It's a really important point, Andrew, about how opportunities are created, I think, as well, and what some of the action on the supply side actually means. I think that's everybody that's signalling. Andrew, is yours? Do you want to come back in, Andrew George? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. I enjoyed reading this pack very much because of its pithiness, but also the amount of detail and data that you included in it. What struck me, Andrew Morris might have a comment on this, is just how the vaccine deployment programme at NHS England towards the end targeted using data ways of opening up access for parts of the community that were not taking up the vaccine. So this was moving away from the use of the phrase hard to reach, but using data to better open up access routes. And the consequence of that was uptakes in the vaccine across the breadth of the communities that we've got here in this country. And for me, what that flagged was the importance of data analysis as a way of actually improving the reach of the programs that we've got. And I just want to emphasize that point, because I suspect as we widen participation, we need to better use the data to begin to identify communities and individuals that could actually benefit from this, and that then converts into some of the data that I think you've got here, which is showing the impact of that, the number of people that were interested, the conversion rates, those people that have gone on to develop a career. But on discussion point number 3, I think one of the issues to tease out in this further work is what is it that needs to be done at a national level and can only be done and is best done at a national level, and then what is it can be done at a regional and a system and at a local level and is best done there. And I'm very minded of the importance of local labour markets and how the labour market in the northwest of England, where I was born and brought up, feels very different than the labour market that I'm in here in the southeast of England, where I now live. And actually responding to those different labour markets is going to be absolutely critical for how we advance this work as well. So this national framework and local action strikes me as being quite an important distinction to begin to tease out. The other thing this encouraged me to think about was the importance of this work alongside international recruitment. Increasingly, I think the importance of, in inverted commas, growing our own and using the widening participation routes as a means to do that, I think is going to be fundamentally important alongside the work we do on international recruitment. And I think beginning to shift that balance so we are growing more of our own, to use that phrase, I think is going to be hugely important as we look over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years as well. So seeing these as complementary, I think is hugely, hugely important as we go forward. So Laura, I don't know that some of the points that have been made by the board in this conversation demand a response here and now. I think this is work in progress, but I will give you the last word on this item and give you the opportunity to sign off, so to speak, on your work as you hand this over to Mark's good offices. And I think you should tell us what your golf handicap is, given we're all declaring numbers here before you depart, because I want to monitor whether, moving on leads to an improvement in your golf handicap or not. But seriously, first, last reflections on this.
Thank you. So they were really great comments to receive, and I think some of them are fact-based, so we can easily come back and circulate round to the board some of the widening access, the programs, particularly for medicine and some other health professions, work we've done with the Sutton Trust. We can just share some of that information with you, so you would just have it as fact, and also we can kind of respond on some of the other points. I think the point that you made, Chairman, about that national regional, we've absolutely picked that up in kind of connecting with the new operating model and being clear about, yes, there are some things that can only be done nationally, but actually we need to do this out with the ICSs, and some of them are incredibly sophisticated around this work. They really are doing some absolutely first-rate work, linking it in, widening access, apprenticeships, whole kind of engagement piece. So I think that there's a really good basis on which to work. And also, with in the new ministerial team, our link minister that Joe Lenihan's been working with, Gillian Keegan, was previously a minister around apprenticeships, and she has highlighted in a number of her speeches the work which we have done within HEE and frequently name checks Jane Hadfield, who you will know, who works for us. as one of our leaders around the development of apprenticeship. So I think we've got some great links and some great ability to move on. And I think the team will really value the comments that have been made. So huge appreciation for your time, interest and commitment, because I think, as Rob said at the beginning, I think this agenda speaks to everybody on this at this board's values. I think it's about our, what is it? We all want this to happen, but how do we make it happen, and how do we get that into bite-sized chunks? So that's
Laura, thank you.
my serious point.
I'm not going to push you on the golf handicap, but I can see you're not volunteering it. So
well, it's work in progress, a bit like, but maybe 2020 is the year that I finally have the much talked of match against Andrew Foster, and I will keep the board informed of the outcome of that, I can assure you.
There's confidence. Right, brilliant, thank you. I was in Cheshire and Merseyside ICS a couple of weeks ago, and really did get a very strong feel for how that ICS is grappling with exactly these issues, assisted by two of our excellent staff. I think, Patrick, I think these were your colleagues in transformation that are now working in the ICS. So it was really good to see that in operation and beginning to make an impact. So thank you, Katie, Rachel, Becky, thanks for your work, and I hope the comments that have been made by colleagues on the board are helpful, and you can pick those up as you take forward this work as Laura hands the baton to Mark for it. So thanks for joining us. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you need to prepare the reports that Laura's just committed you to giving, I understand why you go and write them. So, but big thank you. Right, I'm going to push on now into an update on maternity. And David, you've brought forward an update report on maternity safety after the Ockenden review, and just some of the work that we've undertaken. And again, speaking with you, we thought this was important just to brief the board, given the coverage that has been nationally on maternity services, and just highlight the contribution that Health Education England colleagues, both nationally and locally, are making on improving maternity care through the work that we do. But David, do you want to introduce this? I'm not sure whether you've got a colleague joining you, whether you're going to lead on this item, but if you do have a colleague, please introduce them.
Thank you, David. Yes, Sally Ashton May is HEE's lead midwife, and she's just joined us, who can help answer any questions as we go, but I'll do the introduction if that's okay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll be relatively brief on the introduction. So board members might be aware that Better Births, the strategy for maternity services, was launched in 2016, and HEE led on developing a workforce transformation strategy to underpin the report. And a lot of what was in the strategy was about midwifery growth at the time. And we agreed at the time with Jeremy Hunt that there'd be a 4-year plan for growing the number of midwives that concludes in 2024. So it's still a live plan, although the Better Births and the maternity strategy concluded in April 21. You'll be aware that there have recently been a number of high-profile safety concerns, and that resulted in two things. One being a review of Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital from 2017 that produced a report by Donna Ockenden in December 20, outlining a number of recommendations and concerns. Now, this is an interim report, and we are waiting for the final report to come out. At the same time, there were some safety concerns in other parts of the country, which resulted in a Health Select Committee review and a report on government response, which was published in September this year. Now, within both reports, there are some issues around staffing numbers, funding, leadership and training, and some recommendations around ring-fencing training money, and some of the governance within trusts to ensure that there were more formal senior advocates in maternity services reporting into the board and local maternity systems, as well as some issues around culture and leadership of maternity units. Specifically focusing on Ockenden, the report identifies 7 immediate and essential actions, and they are listed in the report. Many of them are for trusts to undertake, and I know NHSE and I have written to trusts to ensure that certainly the governance side of this and the ring fencing side of this are in place. Additionally, NHSE and I identified over £95 million worth of funding for workforce growth, and that equates to around 1,200 additional midwives and 100 obstetricians. And we are doing quite a lot of work with NHSE and I on understanding the component part of the midwifery side and the obstetric side in terms of what's additional commissions, what's return to practice, what's reduced attrition, etc., etc. So there's a package of things sitting under this. What's also happening is a lot of the reports have talked about the culture of maternity services in particular, and NHSE and I are leading on a piece of work to develop a leadership framework and a cultural framework. And we're very much embedded with that piece of work, and that work is coming to a conclusion now. So again, once we understand any further findings and recommendations from Donna Rockenden's final report, we'll be able to take that forward. Some of the particular work we're doing at the moment is obviously modelling number of midwives against births and looking at the complexity, because some of the additional posts will be to increase establishments, not necessarily increase undergraduate training posts. And we're looking at our contributions to that around shortened programmes, so spring cohorts, etc., to get a quicker opportunity to increase numbers. We're doing some work with the RCOG, so while the increase in is around consultant numbers, we're just working through what does that mean in the future in terms of a supply pipeline. And we're working with the RCOG on understanding that and making some recommendations in the coming weeks on that. At the same time, through the Health Select Committee report, there was funding allocated to the RCOG to develop a workforce modelling tool for medical workforce. And again, we're part of that work to develop what the tool should look like, and that tool should be available from next year to give us a proper assessment of the future need for obstetricians as we go forward. So we've recognised that we need to increase our own capacity to support this work. So we're pleased to have just appointed a deputy lead midwife for Sally, because obviously as the profile of maternity services increases, we get requests for more and more information and responses to queries. So we're just uplifting the capacity within the team to do that. But overall, we are hand in hand with NHSE and I. We're part of every group and forum. We chair the workforce side of this, reporting directly into the National Maternity Programme Board. And we work very closely with Ruth and Duncan, who leads on this from NHSE and I, to the extent they both commented on the paper that we've presented here today, Chairman. So this is just a brief update for you, and we'll do some more work as we get the final report through, which is likely to result in a refresh of the National Workforce Transformation Strategy at the same time. So thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
No, David, really helpful. And I think the bullets on the bottom of page 3 about what we are doing in response to those wider system recommendations from Don Ockenden, particularly helpful. But before I throw it open, Sally, do you want to make any additional comment over and above what David has shared with us, given the role that you are playing and the centrality of that role?
Thank you, Chairman. No, just to say really, as David has said, that we do work extremely closely with NHSEI, and we are at the table for all the discussions that inform the work that we're undertaking, and we provide a lot of support for things that aren't specifically HEE. As David has said, there's no specific ask of us within those actions, but we do ensure that we provide a lot of support. And probably the only other thing that we're doing that feeds into kind of the safety culture and the workforce development is we're just in the process of developing the advanced clinical practice in midwifery credential and education, career and competence framework for midwives from the point of registration through enhanced practice, advanced practice and consultant level practice, because there are no there's currently no kind of mapping for midwives at the point of registration for them to understand where they want to take their career, and then the aligned education opportunities that sit within that. So that's the other piece of work that we're doing, again, with E&I and with the Royal College of Midwives and Nursing and Midwifery Council.
Yeah, no, that's really important, I think, for people to be able to see how a career can develop, and really important for retention, avoidance of burnout, and all those other important dynamics. So thank you for that. And tremendous, David, that you actually shared the report with NHSE colleagues before it came here. I think that sense of partnership working and collaboration is massively important, and just shows how mature those relationships are, and how important it is that we continue to build on them and develop them. Let me just Andrew Morris, please. Yeah, Andrew, thanks.
Thanks, David. David, great to see the joint work with E&I on this. The one thing that is still outstanding for me, and it's something that I've mentioned to Ruth May, is us collectively coming up with a recommendation on consultant cover, particularly for small maternity units that, say, deliver 3,500 babies a year. And I think that by setting some sort of standard on consultant cover, that will inform the number of consultants you need going forward. And that's a big omission for me, and it's something that I think Ruth wants to address. But obviously, if we can get that kind of benchmarking data in place and understand where each maternity unit is at in terms of whatever it is, 90 hours minimum consultant cover over 7 days, or whatever it's going to be, I think that will help influence how many numbers of people we need to train, but also whether there's more funding required to go in. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. There's nobody else raising their hand, so let me give you and Sally the last word on this. It's an important point that Andrew raises, and my history of the past 12 or so years on maternity concerns is often they're associated with very small units and the cover that can actually be applied to them. So it's a important point that Andrew raises. So back to you too, if I may.
Yeah, just to comment on that, we're working very closely with the RCOG, and they have a medical workforce subgroup that we co-chair through one of our deans, Graham Dewhurst. So again, we're sort of hand in hand with that. We've actually got a meeting with the RCOG tomorrow afternoon to work through some of these things and to look at the future pipeline and whether there's any immediate growth in student numbers. So it's certainly something I can pick up with Joe Manfield tomorrow as part of that. But otherwise, I think we're very well connected across the system. David, I think Sally mentioned we work very closely with the NMC, the RCM, pretty much weekly conversations now as we're waiting for Ockenden. So we're trying to get ahead of that and preempt what we think is coming out of Ockenden rather than just wait for it to land. And if board members are interested, we've just done a review of pretty much the last 5 years of the contribution of HEE to the maternity workforce strategy. And that will help inform a stock take to understand what should be in the future strategy if we revise it. But that will be available for board members if you'd like to see more detail.
I'm sure people would actually, David. So I think that's a good offer. This is a hugely important issue, and I think the work that you've outlined is very encouraging. As I say, it was just good to see the clarity with which you've expressed what is it that we are doing in HEE and how will we contribute into that wider action plan, and that it's set out so clearly and precisely is incredibly helpful. So thank you for that. Sally, do you want the last word?
No, just to say thank you for the opportunity to be here and share and support David, and for the support on the ongoing work.
Okay. Thank you to you, Sally. And it sounds like reinforcements are coming your way as well.
Over the hill, thank you.
I'm sure. Well, I don't think you're over the hill at all, but I hope we can get the reinforcements over the hill. But anyway, let's. But a big thank you. Right. Let us move on. So David and Sally, thank you for that. You've allowed us to catch up some time, so we're not all that far off for Liz and Phil Huff's session on the work of the Public Assurance Committee. People's, oh dear me, if I could speak it'd help, wouldn't it? People that, Liz, let me shut up. You do it.
Yeah, so we'll update you on the work of the People's Advisory Committee.
That's it. Thank you.
And we can catch up a bit of time because Phil and I have rehearsed how we do this. But Phil, if I kick off and then you finish off with a presentation, maybe that's the best way to do it. So, so thanks for the opportunity to present. People's Advisory Committee is always a really sort of sparky forum, and the purpose of the forum is that we support HEE to make sure that lived experience is embedded into culture, attitude, communication, policy work. And last month I circulated around some of the summaries of what PAC members were doing. We call them the closing the loop summaries, going along to different meetings, talking about lived experience, how any policy decisions or practices might affect that. And if the board want that, I can do that again. So since that was circulated, PAC members have been at the Topple Digital Fellowship Group, the Patient Safety Implementation Group, the Blended Learning Medical Degree Group, Medical Education and Training Forum, Mental Health Nursing, Children's and Young People's Task Force, the Mental Health Nursing Subgroup. And I think Phil's been pointing out in the chat as we've been going on that there were also the Advancing Dental Care Board. So lots of great work. So if board members are happy, we'll just circulate that every couple of months because that's how we see it now at PAC. So we can just show how PAC members are raising issues and they're being adopted by HEE. So the you said we did, levelling up, we see that really sort of in sways with PAC members supporting this agenda. So in the last meeting, we always have a really great executive update from Mark, who sort of tells PAC members about what's going on in the operational side of the business. And Laura and colleagues came along to talk to us about widening participation, which PAC members had lots of comments on from their own experience. We discussed recruitment to PAC. So because of COVID, we haven't recruited for a bit, so we've had some PAC members whose terms have ended, and we really wanted to think about how we do this to get the best out of people. So the normal sort of recruitment process that we use at Health Education England puts people off applying to things like PAC. It's quite admin based. You've got to fill in lots of forms, and sometimes people don't feel confident with doing that. So we've worked with HR on a new process so we can attract people onto PAC, and we want to make sure we've got really good geographical representation so that we can get views from all parts of the country, as well as people with different lived experiences. So that's all been signed off. PAC members have been coming up with questions that we might want to send out in advance of interviews. So it's not a memory test for people, but we actually get the best out of people and why they would feel they could support the business of the organisation through PAC. So that work's all going on behind the scenes. And we'll be sort of updating you on progress with that. So Phil, shall I hand over to you to take the board members through a presentation that's been circulated?
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz. So I just want to go through a couple of points from the slides. I think what's really important is that every single meeting we have a focus on being inclusive, so inclusion and diversity. But it's not just at PAF. I think what we do is try and champion that through all the work streams that we're involved in as well. We don't just have a single discussion about it at our PAF meetings. And I think it's really key that we understand, you know, the communities that we all come from have that kind of divergence and different experiences of healthcare services. And I think it's really important that we bring all that into the kind of element of PAF and into Health Education England. And as I said, but more importantly, that we challenge that sometimes in the work streams and ensure that we're thinking about that as work progresses in the various things. On to the next slide. Really important that we were involved with the Enhancing Junior Doctors Lives work, which was really exciting. That again, you know, these are the very people that David came along to our last. David came along to our last PAF meeting and said, ultimately, you know, HEE's consumers are its students really, and ultimately patients are its next set of consumers really. And I think that distinction is really important to understand actually how you use the power of that that lived experience. I think this morning we had the brilliant presentation from Helen and Kamaljet. For me, I had to turn my camera off because it was just a little bit too emotional for me, because it really shows that the power of actually listening to people's lived experience and their journeys can transform so much really in healthcare. And I think it's such a powerful tool to change cultures, to challenge process and procedures. And I think, you know, PAF tries to emulate that at its meetings and in the work that they do. And obviously working, you know, the doctors are our kind of primary care interface. So working on projects like that are really, really important. Liz has already touched on and sent you the documents that we're involved in a huge, vast array of work streams and programs. I like to think it's the, for our comms colleagues, it's the vast and the various of PAF. Really, that's what we do. Really, we try and get involved as much as we can. And then moving forward, it's kind of, you know, priorities for the next kind of 6 months. Again, Liz touched on that PAF recruitment. Really important to have the say of PAF in that recruitment process, which we've done this time, and we have done in previous years. I was lucky enough to be part of the selection process that we did previous to this. My claim to fame is that I've been involved in every single PAF recruitment. So I applied and was interviewed for the first round of PAF. The second round of PAF I was lucky enough to get on, and I interviewed the most recent PAF. So really proud that our lived experience voice will be present in that selection process. And I think that's really powerful. We've already touched on that we needed to tweak the HR process, which we've done, and PAF's been accommodating to, HE's been accommodating for PAF to do that. So really pleased that that's possible. I think we were, Navina came to one of our meetings and challenged us to say, actually, you know, how do you be the best that you can be? You know, how do you really give of your lived experience, and how do you maximise on that? And I think that was a challenge, really. And I think PAF had worked really well in previous years, but I don't think we'd had that challenge of actually, you know, how do you impact on what HE does right across all the programmes, not just in the specific works that you're involved in, but in the culture of HE and everything else. So I think we've gone away and we've all thought about that, actually, how do we develop and how do we grow? And we're working on and we're discussing about, you know, maximising our potential really, and having the best impact we can for health education in England, and using our lived experience in a very positive way to transform things and improve ultimately for patient care. It's quite funny when Sir David said actually your core customers at HE are your students. It's almost like, well, actually we want the care from the finished product. So it's actually that kind of, how do we, you know, emulate that right across the programme, so ultimately to deliver the best care, because that's the lived experience we're using. So that recruitment is really important. I wanted just to thank both Liz here today and also Liz Fenton, who helped to run PAF very passionately and very importantly give us that kind of support and stability that we need sometimes. It is I love the description about a lively debate sometimes at PAF. We are a broad church and we are a very passionate group of individuals. So I would welcome any of the non-execs if anybody wanted to turn up to a PAF to witness that in full effect. It's really important though that people say to us, you know, get involved, do what you can do, but actually any involvement in any healthcare system or any system really, we can only do that when we are allowed to do that. So actually, unless we have the dedicated exec team that we've got, so Mark and Navina, to do that and to support us and actually say, yes, do that, challenge that, we wouldn't be able to do it. And I'm not just blowing smoke. It's really important to say that. Unless you've got that dedicated leadership that really believes in lived experience, it never happens. It only goes so far. And to you, Sir David, as well, for the time and dedication that you give PAF, it really does mean a lot to PAF members when we discuss it in our pre-meets, you know, the fact we have connections with our chair of the organisation and our executive leads and chief exec. It does mean a lot. It's a big value for us that actually our lived experience is being valued by the entirety of the organisation. So again, I think I wanted to flag that actually HEE has this really good involvement because it allows that really good involvement. And I think power to the organisation and its leadership for allowing us to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz and Phil. Liz, for you taking on the mantle, I remember when you became a non-executive director, I said, I want you to take on responsibility for this. And you kind of looked at me and said, OK, then. And I think working with Phil, you've taken the space that you were given and you've really created the path into something which is a real positive contributor to the work of this organisation. And what strikes me is it's not about the meetings that you hold, it's about the way that members of the forum contribute to the individual work programmes in quite a regular way. And Liz, you mentioned the reports that came to the last PATH meeting. What impressed me is just the depth and the breadth of the reach of the contribution of those of you with lived experience, Phil, into those fora. And I think it's in the chat box just about how much of a contribution you've made to the Advancing Dental Careers work through the forum, just to make some of the connections with the work that we've had today. So I don't see how a modern organisation can't be successful without involving its ultimate end users. So I think our direct customers are the students, our end users are all of us that use health and care services, and that's why we need to get it right. Unless anybody's got a pressing comment they want to make, I suggest we move on, that we thank Phil and Liz for the work. Thank the wider organisation actually for the changes. I think shifting systems and processes to be more open, to be more accessible is a significant development, and I think those colleagues, Lee and David Farrelly now in HR, that have actually made those changes, I'd be grateful if they could get feedback from the board meeting that wasn't just a sequence of technical changes, but actually does make a difference for how we can get the voice of people with lived experience to inform our work. Change occurs with lots and lots and lots of very small steps that add up to something that is much bigger than those steps, and these are all important. And whether colleagues in HR felt by changing the recruitment process they were making a contribution to better involvement, I don't know, but let's hope that we can make that connection for them. And I think non-executive colleagues in particular, but I think also probably executive colleagues, it sounds like Phil has given you a standing invitation to come to all or part of future meetings. I don't always get to all of them, but I do try to get to some of the meeting that takes place. So I'm sure you'll be given a warm welcome by Liz and Phil and other colleagues as well. So terrific, thank you. Let's move on to that, and I think that gets us to the items on performance, but before that, let's invite Patrick to kick off the item on digital. I think Liz and Phil, you've got us pretty much back on track, for which thank you. Phil, please feel free to stay for the remainder of the meeting. But Patrick, can I hand over to you to take us through the work that you and your teams have been doing on digital readiness and the future from an HEE perspective?
Thank you, David, and I'll be brief so that board members have time to ask questions. It's nearly 2 years since we published the Topol report, and pleased to say that pretty much all of those recommendations within that report were built into the digital readiness programme, so that it wasn't a report that sat on the shelf, but we actually did something about it, and we're making good progress in all of those areas. The other point I'd say up front is globally all healthcare systems are looking to digital in a way to support them thinking through how they bring about transformational change, and a major recognition in particular around the use of AI and data are critical, and that puts a big responsibility on us as HEE in terms of making sure that not only are we getting digital skills to the masses of the NHS in terms of our staff, but actually we're thinking through some of the more complexities around the very specialist skills that we need to get to clinicians across the 7 professions. The key point I want to make in this part, and the 3 points I want to do, is one, to talk about very briefly what we've delivered so far. And the key things in here are the digital program is going very well. Over 50 trusts have now done that and well received, and another 30 signed up. So good progress in that space. Hugely proud that we brought about the establishment of the Federation of Information Professionals. If you think about our data, informatics and technology staff are from the non-regulated part of the workforce in the NHS, one of the few bits of the workforce that isn't regulated. We've been able to bring together, through the establishment of the Federation of Information Professionals, the 6 professional bodies that can now support standardization, consistency of the roles that we want, and what level of education attainment do we need at each level across that broad group of professionals. And that's gone incredibly well. Last month, we brought in the 4th 100th cohort of people from CIO and Chief Information Officer and Clinical Chief Information Officer groups joining the Digital Academy, and our offer on that is widening much further. And we've undertaken a large piece of workforce planning, thinking about what is the future need for the digital professionals and the numbers that they require. So a lot has been delivered. It's in the paper. I'm not going to go through any more of that. The second point of the report is to let the board know that NHSX have now appointed a Director of Digital Workforce and Professionalism to take forward this agenda from HEE. I think that's the right thing to do. The service has to set the professional standards that they want from data, informatics and technology staff. That is not a role for HEE, and it's important that NHSX, with NHS England as service, set that standard. So this role will be taking on that work, but we'll also be looking at workforce planning, because again, though we can provide the professional workforce planners, which we will do through Rob's team to support the work of the digital workforce planning, it's for service to say how many they need and when they need them and how they're going to get that pipeline through. So it's really important that to note we are going to hand back that piece of work to NHSX, and next month seek to novate a number of contracts back to NHSX, and though we will continue to support, it will be not part of the digital readiness programme. And the final point is really to talk about the programme as it moves forward. And this really is to build on the board development work that we're doing that has been well received. We're now commissioning for all of the ICS boards to go through a similar development for themselves. We're out to commission that at the present time. The Digital Academy, which was seen very much as an imperial product just for CIOs and CCIOs, is now being broadened to a much wider offering of a whole group of commissioned activities, which will help a range of people from graduates all the way up through to specialist clinicians undertake specified learning that will help them in terms of attaining digital skills that they require to undertake their roles. Within that, it includes a piece of work where we're looking at AI technologies and the impact of that on the current different clinical professions and what competencies people will require for that. We're doing some work with the colleges of surgeons around attainment for surgeons undertaking the new robotics that are now on the market. And we're looking to digital skills attainment for the wider workforce through a self-assessment tool, which is going to go live later in the year. And the piece that I think I really would welcome the board's feedback on is how do we maintain the momentum of this programme? Have we got the pitch right? We recognise we've got to get diversity right. We've got to make sure the people on our programmes really do represent the staff that are within service. We're getting much better at that, certainly from the Digital Academy and the Yale programme. The diversity of that it is considerably more conforming with the populations we're serving. We need to make sure then that our the revising the materials we're using is actually relevant. So when people are saying, why are we doing this? They can actually go, actually, this is adding value to the job that I am doing. I can see why I'm doing this, and the material is meeting my needs. We clearly need to understand the interdependencies with our other organisations, particularly NHSX, and we're doing that to make sure that we're not duplicating works. And then we're looking forward to see what service is asking for us. And it's great that colleges, the Academy of Royal Colleges, more recently come to us to say they want to work with us on a joint piece of work, looking forward to what are the future digital skills needs of the medical profession. So I think that's all I've got to say. It's to note progress on what we've done to date. It's to note we're novating a piece of the programme back to NHSX. I think we've caretaken that well, but it's time for NHSX to take that back. And we've set ourselves a challenging agenda moving forward in terms of digital acquisition across a whole range of staff, not just for the masses, but for the whole range of professions that we serve. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Is David Farrell with you on the call? Is he with us?
Sorry, I should have said David, who's head of the Digital Readiness Programme, is here, yes.
Yeah, okay. David, just do you want to add your voice to Patrick's just very briefly? Is that because you're on mute, or is that because...
I thought he was here. He said he was going to be.
Don't, Patrick. I just think it's important that people that have prepared reports get the opportunity to have their voice heard in our meetings. But I know David from previous work. So, Patrick, my personal view is this is a terrific report. Again, a bit like the report that Laura brought on widening participation, some real granularity about the activities that are being undertaken, and a real sense of the numbers and the progress going through. But I also, for what I would regard as nascent professions, the creation of the infrastructure with the Federation is, I think, a significant development. And building on the postgraduate qualifications that you introduced through the Digital Academy, I think also begins to contribute to how we grow this workforce in the future. But I'm also pleased to see this clarity of role distinction between what NHSX does and what we in HEE do, and actually seeing how you've matured that over the past few months. I think it's a terrific piece of work, Patrick. So congratulations on that. And whilst there is a lot still to do, because digital is going to be one of the way the NHS is going to be transformed, it needs this infrastructure in place to actually take it forward. So from my perspective, really very, very well done. I think this is a very good report. So let me open this up, if I may. Andrew George, please.
Thank you, Patrick, for the paper. And I guess a lot of very impressive training programs going out there, which are absolutely right. I suppose when we hit real success will be when we don't run digital modules, but we have digital embedded in all modules, and I suppose and in all programs. And I guess, what's your strategy for infiltrating and contaminating all programs with digital?
Really good point, and we do recognise that in terms of when does transition take place, that actually this becomes part of the day-to-day business. So that's where we're at. So we're working now with the Council of Deans and the Medical Schools Council on how we introduce digital skills training to all undergraduate curricula, number one. And then we're in conversations, partly through the blended learning program, actually, as much as the digital readiness, around how do we introduce this to all postgraduate courses as well, so that colleges and the like pick it up as part of their training. And some are already ahead of this. I really want to do that. We're doing a really nice piece of work with the British Association of Dermatologists, who are actually funding 4 Top-Hole fellowships. Because they recognise they can't come to us to ask for more training numbers if they haven't themselves understood how digital is impacting on them as a specialty, and how particularly image recognition and AI is going to drive the way the specialty will function in the future. So it's great to see that sort of work being done. But I think it's all good. I hope that Andrew answers your question, Andrew, but particularly undergraduates through the Council of Deans and the Medical Schools Council. I should say, David Farrell, apologies. He's actually watching us on YouTube and not linked to this. I don't know how that happened, but he can't answer.
Well, David, on YouTube, thank you for watching us. You could have participated, but your work is appreciated. But Andrew, George, I think your point is a really important one about how we move from the margins to the mainstream and this becomes embedded is the challenge I think we face. And yeah.
I should have actually, David's just reminded me to say that one of the real successes that's come out recently is we've established information skills development networks across all our 7 regions. This is based on a Northwest model that's been in operation for some time, where all the professions from data, informatics and technology come together to share their ideas and thinking from a professional basis, but then develop their own training needs based on what the local geography needs. Now, that's worked incredibly well over the past few years in the Northwest, and within less than 12 months, we've established now 7 across all regions, which is really a powerhouse. I suppose the equivalent of the primary care training hubs we established for primary care as the place for education and training to be discussed. But it's a real opportunity for us to then embed skills development into local geography and to support ICSs on their journey with this space.
Okay, very good, Patrick. Harpreet, please.
Can you hear me? There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Patrick, for this really good piece of work. Just 2 points from me. One is, with all the skills and training development we're doing, how is that relating and becoming career opportunities for many people? And because I think for many who are going through this, they feel that they're being exposed to a lot of excellent insight, training, development, but not getting the job opportunities or the careers after that in order for them to then embed this. Is there a piece of work that's encompassing that, or is that kind of more NHSX territory? That's kind of the first thing. And the second is that, do we feel that it's the right time now to introduce some evaluation of this work to know and see where and how it's actually making impact across the system? Thank you.
Okay.
Good questions. It is an NHSX.
Patrick, just hold. Let me get all the questions and can round them all up at the end. John Latham, please.
Sorry, just coming up mute. Yeah, I think that the other thing for me, which of course fits into the work we were talking about earlier around widening participation and levelling up and all of the other activity, for me is around, really getting a good understanding on digital poverty and digital skills gaps generally, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in this space. In fact, I was on a meeting yesterday where people were talking around, the whole digital agenda around professions. But actually, we are finding there is huge digital poverty still existing. And when you add in widening participation, even at the postgraduate level, we're seeing a lot of people who can get connectivity in the workplace, but actually still nowhere else. So I think we just mustn't forget, whatever we do, there is a pace at which the bottom line is that we still have many areas of the country and many individuals who are trying to get into the professions and trying to develop their skills where digital poverty is still quite a big issue.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Soraya, please.
Thank you, Patrick. Just really linked to Harpreet's point around evaluation and really what data sets we've got around the TOEFL fellows and what challenges and barriers some of them are having, particularly at provider level in terms of linking up with the leadership and making sure that their skill set are used. And then the point I think John just made, are we linked across? For example, I know D and X have done or are on a massive recruitment drive, and there are key areas where recruitment is really difficult, and I wondered if we're joined up into some of that skills gap work.
Okay, thanks, Soraya. So I think, Patrick, in the report, you and David asked a question about if the new ambition preparing for the digital skills of the NHS workforce as set out is sufficiently ambitious for current need. I think what you've got are questions about evaluation, and they speak to that question. But final word from you, please, Patrick.
If I can just very quickly, we evaluate everything we've done. We've just completed an evaluation of the Topol Fellowship Programme. And I'm very happy to share all those evaluations back with the board for interest. On careers piece, clearly as part of, we need to make sure across the whole career pathway of anybody that we've got the learning and development for individuals for them to move to the next step. Our experience of the people that have taken part in the Digital Academy so far on the Topol Fellowship Programme, they've all pretty much, well, certainly from the Digital Academy point of view, got promotion and moved into more senior roles. I think as a result of their participation in the Academy, pretty much everybody's moved on a role as part of that participation. From a Topol Fellowships, we've found that people are moving into niche roles and areas where they're still able to act as a clinician, but still participate doing something from a digital perspective. So on the digital poverty, I think that's a major issue, not just for our staff, but for us as citizens as a whole, in terms of how do we make sure that we can, I suppose, map digital literacy and health literacy at the same time, because in Britain, health literacy, 43% are health illiterate. So there's a huge opportunity here to improve health literacy and digital literacy at the same time. But we've got to make sure that people are connected to be able to do that. And there are a whole heap of initiatives on at the present time across the country to allow that connectivity to take place.
Patrick, how would you answer the question that you posed, which is about whether we're ambitious enough? I think the next cohort of people going through the academy is really positive, and I think it's demonstrated what a positive programme it has been and what contribution it's made. But that's, what is it, 300 graduates out of a combined workforce of hundreds of thousands, and I suspect that was partly behind your question about ambition. Just say something about how we take this work to scale from the kind of nascent position that it's in.
I think if we look at the success of the primary care training hubs in terms of getting people to talk about education and training in primary care, then we should use the information skills development networks in the same way to give people the opportunity for the first time to talk about what are the digital skills that they require across data, informatics and technology, not necessarily all at the same time, that they need in their given geography, and how they're going to support the NHS staff in their geography to gain those skills. That to me is where the ambition is, because if we can get it from a bottom-up approach, not a top-down approach, then taking from the Northwest learning, the Northwest really are advanced in this space because they get it. They work together collegiately on this skills development and decide what the priorities are for the Northwest. I paint a rosy picture. I'm sure it's not totally that rosy, as because people always have differences within a geography. But my sense is that's the real opportunity. It's bottom up, of people saying what they need for their local service that's going to make the difference, and then for us to then put the resource there to allow that to happen.
So the work with NHSX and HEE is providing that framework to allow that local activity to grow and develop.
I think our role in this is very much about the learning and development and the skills acquisition. That's core business for HEE. I think from NHSX perspective, it will be around the professionalisation agenda, around the actual people that are part of the digital workforce and how they support them. So it's got to be us working hand in hand. We will support the wider NHS workforce, particularly clinicians in skills acquisition, and NHSX will then support the digital workforce in what they need to happen. But we will be supporting the education and training for the digital workforce. We won't step away from that. We will still very much be part of the learning and development approach.
Okay, Patrick, thank you. And I think we should make sure that we are updated as a board with this work as it progresses. As I say, I think it's hugely significant to ensure we've got the workforce that we will require in the future to accommodate the penetration of new technology, science, into the way that services are designed, developed and then delivered. So a really important work, Patrick, so thank you. So that completes that item. So next item is the performance report, which is there in front of you. Andrew and colleagues have scrutinised this in the most recent meeting. David F., I don't know whether you want to say any words by way of introduction or whether I just invite any questions or comments from the wider board.
The only thing I would add is that the report is Q2, so it's usually relatively positive at that stage. However, for the purpose of training nurse associates, it's Q4 we're in now. So that's the one where we've got our eyes on to see where we're going to land between now and Christmas, because it's a calendar year target. We do take a bit of a stock check in October and November, because we have the regional improvement forums where we get a better sense of whether the good position in Q2 is maintained through into Q3. And on the whole, it is. But we've always going into December with your TNAs is very dependent on how busy winter is. So at the moment, the cohorts add up to us achieving the target. But that's on the proviso that all of the cohorts run as they should run. The only other element I would raise was return to practice within the context of 50k, but I think Mark's already put it in the briefing in Navina's cover paper. So those are just the two things, David.
Really helpful. Andrew, George, is there anything you want to add? No, we did it at the top of the meeting.
We did it at the top of the page,
yeah. Okay. So can I invite the board to note the progress? And as David said, it's the next report that we get a real feel for what the outturn is going to be. And let's hope that we manage to achieve our ambition in relation to training nurse associates, and the plans that you've laid, David, are delivered in reality. So thank you for that. Let's move on then to finance. Callum, anything you want to draw our attention to? I think you'll say it's Q2 and it's difficult to draw conclusions, and this is a projection, but go on, let me not steal your thunder.
Yeah, thanks, David. Well, between you and Andrew, who obviously was paying attention when I talked Performance Business Committee through this, we're showing a forecast underspend, but we have got some risk associated with costs from COVID that are yet to be built into that forecast, and there genuinely is some volatility around this, partly because of the time of year. We've yet to get the new academic year data into this forecast, so that is what we really need to keep an eye out on over the next month or two. And it's particularly volatile because of obviously the impact of COVID ongoing within the NHS and the strain on the service. So are trainees going to be released for training, etc.? So yeah, it is a bit of a watch this space, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, I think we understand those risks after last year and the part of the year before as well. So in that sense, Callum, it's helpful to get a clear picture here, even though there are some known unknowns, to use that phrase. Yeah. Okay. And again, Andrew and colleagues have been through this in the performance committee. So Are there any questions that anybody not in that committee wants to ask about this, or can we just accept this as being just a factual report on where we sit? Yeah, people are nodding their head at that. Okay, thank you, Callum. And then Lee, Nicola, I'm not sure who is available for this, but the board assurance framework is here. It's an important piece of work, and I think what you've got here is the most recent update to the board on the assurance and the activity which is underway. And you can see there are paragraphs in the matrix which are giving an update on progress in mitigating the risks that are identified in this. But anything you want to say by way of intro, Lee, Nicola?
Pass over to Nick. Nick's going to talk us through it.
Okay.
Okay,
Nick?
Thanks, Lee. Thanks to David. I think you've largely said it to David. The board assurance framework, as we presented it, is largely a reflection of what the board have received, discussed, considered over the last couple of months, both in board meetings and in committees, to give an indication of where your assurance ratings may be for each of the opportunities and benefits that you've identified. So it's just playing back in real summary form everything that you've had so that you keep that view on it. We've got a full version of the BAF, the 20-page one, but we'll only present that twice a year at most. I think this summary is much better, easier to digest for members. And obviously what we will do now, there's been a lot of discussion today that will feed into further updates to the BAF.
Yeah.
And it's for members to consider the assurances received and the level of assurances proposed.
Yeah. And the point about today, Nicola, is that this is you're running this as a live document, a dynamic document, which is being as we move forward. So, colleagues, any comments, reflections on the assurance framework? Are we content to note the work that has been captured here? Okay, thank you, Nicola. We need to find a way of certain times in our agenda planning, making sure this is at the top of the meeting rather than at the back end of the meeting, and that might just bring that energy we've all got at 9:30 to it, as opposed to the energy we've got at 12:30 to it. And I think the phrase is kick the tires, but we can pick that up as we go. That might be the point you're making about the 2 times a year we bring the fuller thing, that we can just give a slightly more time towards making sure that we are truly satisfied that we've got assurance that the risks are being managed. I for one am. I think as chair, I'm more than satisfied that the committees are actually now going through these areas in quite fine detail and going into them, and the issues are being flagged by the chairs or in the reports we're getting to this board. So I think that reshaping of the balance of work between the main board, this board meeting, and the committees is really proving to be very, very effective. So at a personal level, I think all that work that has been invested over the past 9 months or so is beginning to take effect. And I think I for one, take great assurance, to use the word from the work that is going on. So thank you. Thank you. Navina, last word of the morning to you.
Thank you, Sir David. I just wanted to support your suggestion to bring the board assurance framework at the start of the meeting, because I think it would help us to frame our thinking for the rest of the agenda items with the risks and the assurances, the assurance in mind. And then we would also do the same, perhaps we would do the same with the executive team in advance of, in preparation for the board meeting, so that we also bear the assurance in mind when we prepare our report.
Yeah, in some respects, it makes sense after the committee chairs updates to do the board assurance framework, doesn't it? Yeah. So okay, let's not do that live in the meeting, so to speak. I think we've got a long way by the exec team taking these things away and working out how to do it and bringing it back to the board. So let's continue in that vein. So I think that gets us to the end of our meeting. I've not been notified of any items of other business unless anybody wants to raise their hand now. No, it just remains for me to thank you all for your attendance and participation. Navina, thanks to you and the executive team for the reports and the work that has contributed to those reports. But non-executive colleagues, thanks for your contributions today, and also for your discipline in getting the meeting through in good time. We're actually bang on time, which I didn't think we'd manage, but so thank you for that. And Nicola, I think we're going to now formally end the meeting, so I draw the public board meeting to a close. And I think, colleagues, if I could invite you to come out of this meeting and then go into another link for those of us that are going to attend the private board meeting. And I think the private board meeting is